Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live this morning via our YouTube channel, Illegal Curve Radio is how you can find us on YouTube, or just search for Illegal Curve Hockey on YouTube. We say good morning to the Winnipeg Jets and NHL universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We've got comprehensive Winnipeg Jets coverage, analysis, and discussion, looking back at last night's Jets victory over the Vancouver Canucks, previewing Sunday's return matchup against the Canucks, and of course next week's battles against the Montreal Canadiens. With Ezra Ginsburg and Dave Minuk, I'm your host, Drew Mandel, and we welcome you to the program on this Saturday morning. Nice to see so many of you joining us via the YouTube and anywhere that you may be tuning in to this program. Ezzy, good to see you. Dave, good to see you. I got to start as, how much longer is this look going to go? Haircuts are open. You can get a haircut now. You can, trim that beard a little bit. I mean, if you weren't in somebody's house right now and you were on the street, you would definitely be at the necessary disheveled level where I would give you a couple toonies or something.
Yeah, probably. But the problem with the haircuts is if you go to get a haircut, I can't speak for other provinces, but here in Manitoba, if you go to get a haircut, they won't trim your beard and mustache. So as you can see, that's a big part of the hair that's on my head right now. So yeah, I can go get a haircut, but I'm still going to have this big beard, which means I'm going to have to trim it at home, which I have been proven to not be able to do. So
you until I can trim your own beard.
Well, I can physically trim it, but I'm not going to do a very good job of it, and it's going to look uneven. So I'm going to wait until you can actually get your beard and mustache trimmed before I get a haircut. So that might not be until May or June.
Okay, well, at least that's not a problem that Dave Minuk has. A nice clean-shaven look there, Dave. Nice and professional. Although, of course, the etiquette about wearing a hat indoors is something we've discussed before, but we don't need to rehash that one again.
I'm not so sure it would ever work on me.
What's that? A beard?
I don't know. Hat, no hat indoors. I don't subscribe to that.
I know you don't subscribe to that. I know you're very froom. It's all about wearing a head covering. I guess it's either the hat or it's a kippa, right?
Or a toque, I would guess, but sure.
That's true. A toque would also work in this instance as it works. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started talking about last night's Winnipeg Jets victory over the Vancouver Canucks. And it was a win, I'm going to say, that was unlike most other wins we've seen from the Jets this year. I mean, we're used to the Jets playing open fire wagon brand of hockey. Not that that's necessarily how Paul Maurice wants the team to play, but that's sort of been the modus operandi in the North Division so far. Last night was not that. It was a tight checking game. It was a game with very good goaltending on both sides, particularly by Laurent Brossoit, of course. And the Jets end up being able to shut down the Canucks and end up with the 2-0 victory, which is an all-important 2 points against the Canucks team that has been struggling and is below the Jets in the standings, and that's where the Jets obviously want to keep them.
Yeah, and you're right, Drew. I mean, especially, when you go back to that first game in Edmonton when it was 6-5, I mean, we're just not used to having many 2-1 or 3-2 games, even though last weekend against Ottawa, it was a 2-1 game, and then, you had one game against the Calgary Flames a couple of weeks ago that the Jets won 3-2. But for the most part, we're expecting, at least 5 goals, if not, 7 or 8 goals per game. So yeah, this game was definitely different than the 2 games against the Oilers. But, when you look at, especially the Oilers and, they beat the Flames last night, I mean, the Jets needed this win. And now you're just trying to keep that separation between yourself and the other teams that are chasing you, right? We're not sure, if the Jets are going to catch the Leafs. I mean, the Leafs definitely have that nice cushion right now. But, that was a big win. And, Josh Morrissey talked about it before the game. Paul Maurice talked about it before the game. They said, they didn't want to lose a second game in a row. And obviously, you could argue that game on Wednesday night against the Oilers, the Jets were much better than the game on Monday, which they won. So I think that they carried a lot of the good things that they did in that game on Wednesday night in Edmonton over to the game on Friday. And, watching that Canucks team, boys, I mean, we have to give, Laurent Brossoit credit right off the bat, picks up a big shutout. But, aside from that lotto line of Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, and JT Miller, and don't get me wrong, that second line with, Bo Horvat, Tanner Pearson, and Nils Hoglander, I really like that line. But you look at that Canucks team and, they remind you a lot of, the Flames and, the Oilers, in that they have two really good scoring lines. But after that, the offense, dries up, fairly quickly. And I realize, a player like Brandon Sutter's had a good year, and you've got some, Jay Beagle's a good, veteran guy on the fourth line. But, that Canucks defense, I think, is still a work in progress. But overall, give the Jets credit. I mean, the Jets did play what you would call a textbook road game. It wasn't perfect, but for the most part, I mean, really, at any point in that game, boys, did you think that the Canucks were going to come back and win that game? I didn't. I thought the Jets were in control, most of the game. They probably could have had, 2 or 3 more goals, even going back to that first period, that really good chance by Nikolai Ehlers. So, it was a very, tidy victory is the word I would describe. And, they needed that coming off of that really, disheartening loss on Wednesday.
Well, to your point there, Ezzy, I mean, Laurent Brossoit, there was a point probably in the first period, maybe it was early in the second, where you just saw how comfortable Laurent Brossoit looked in goal for the Jets last night, Dave. And you're wondering, what was it going to take for the Canucks to get a puck past them? And obviously that chance by Nate Schmidt where the puck trickled behind him and then Brossoit reached back and swiped it away from trouble. I mean, Brossoit just looked like he was so solid and comfortable in net. I mean, what is it now? 88 shots that he's faced in goal while playing in Vancouver, and he stopped all 88 of them. I think that was the stat that our buddy Mike McIntyre tweeted out. So, he just looked very solid in net last night, Dave.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of confidence, and our friend Kevin Woodley from Kevin in Goal that writes for NHL.com. He's a goalie expert. Whenever we have goalie questions, we talk to him, and he asked Paul Maurice about that after the game, and he said, what kind of confidence does it give your team having a player who has a similar style, has a similar coach, has everything off-season training-wise as Connor Hellebuyck, and the two have such a close relationship? Does that provide your team with a little bit of, comfort? And we sometimes talk about that, right? Does the team have as much when they play in front of the backup as they do in front of the starter? And look, Connor Hellebuyck, Laurent Brossoit, has been phenomenal pretty much from training camp. Like, everybody has been talking about how dialed in he's looked during his starts, and he's been excellent for the Winnipeg Jets, and they're going to need him, especially not now, but come March, when the season really condenses, when you're playing the Montreal and the Torontos, you're going to need him to be on the top of his game. And to me, he's looked phenomenal, and he's looked like the Laurent Brossoit we kind of expected him to be. So, a key element, I thought he was simply sensational last night in the win. And it was funny hearing him. I don't remember who asked him after the game about the Nate Schmidt save, Drew, and he said he almost was too fast on it, and he kind of overthought it, and he quickly made the save. And credit to Thatcher Demko. I thought he was excellent as well. I thought both goaltenders put on a clinic. I mean, there were two, as he's point, the Jets probably could have had 2, 3, 4 more goals. And I thought Demko was excellent. The Canucks just couldn't generate. And you can see you really getting a sense from a team that's frustrated in Vancouver. And, the loss of Markstrom, the loss of Tanev, those seem to be really impacting this Vancouver Canucks team, because we're not seeing what we saw last year from them this year.
Well, to your point there, Dave. I mean, you were talking about the frustration in Vancouver, and I think it was post game. Elias Pettersson was talking about, he's sort of sick and tired of listening to, or having to say every post game that, it's all about, how close we were to getting. It's a matter of fact that they're not getting the puck in the net, whereas not that the Jets got the puck in the net a lot last night. They got it just really the one goal before the Mason Appleton empty netter. But it's just, in Vancouver, you can feel the frustration building, but the Jets took advantage of that. They took advantage of a team that is not playing with a lot of confidence, even though, for a lot of that game, I thought Vancouver was as good, if not better, than the Jets. But when you have a team that sort of knows how to win, and right now, whatever you want to say about the Jets, whatever you want to say about some of their underlying numbers, so far this year, they're a team that knows how to win. And I mean, I don't think you can put too much emphasis on how important it is that they just haven't had losing streaks this year. Mm-hmm. Whenever they lose a game, they bounce back the next game with a victory. And when you're playing an only in-division schedule, it's just so key and just so essential that you don't have those losing streaks. If Vancouver wins last night, well, they get a little bit closer to the Jets. I'm not sure the Jets have a ton of games in hand on Vancouver. But by the win, at worst, you're going to be even after this 2-game series. And if you win on Sunday, I mean, you're almost putting so much of a gap between yourself and the Canucks, especially given the games you have in hand, that it's sort of ridiculous to say. And I'm not saying that it's guaranteed to be lights out, but it's almost like it's lights out for Vancouver when you're not even a third of the way through the season.
Well, interestingly, I think this percentages, someone tweeted yesterday, I think the Jets are right now a 75% odds favorite to make the playoffs, and Vancouver, I think, was about 17%. So, I mean, to your point, Drew, it's not looking good in Vancouver based on what they've had to deal with in terms of these long streaks and feast and famine, whereas the Jets, because they've been able to bounce back after a loss, have put themselves into a position to stay competitive for really probably that third spot in the North.
Absolutely, and that's what's so important for the Winnipeg Jets there. I mean, Mark Scheifele, Mark Scheifele obviously had the beautiful breakaway goal, and Demko, he just deked Demko out, and that's a goal scorer's goal, as the proverbial saying goes. But what was most impressive to me from the Jets' perspective almost all game long is the back pressure, particularly by the forwards. There were a number of different occasions throughout the game where forwards were back checking so well. I can remember one from Kopp off the top of my head, one from Ehlers, and I believe also one from Matthew Perreault, if I'm not mistaken, where active sticks on Vancouver Canucks rushes really did a great job in preventing the Canucks from getting a quality scoring chance on what looked like initially to be an odd man rush.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt, Drew, that they were a very sharp team defensively. Like we talked about, there were some decent chances that Vancouver had, both at even strength and on the power play. But I really think the Jets carried through their effort from Wednesday night against Edmonton. Like I really thought that was a game in which the Jets deserved at least a point, right? And when you're going up against the Oilers, that they have the ability to score goals, and they're not very good defensively. And I'm not saying that the Jets were head and shoulders better than the Oilers, but I definitely think they carried the play for the majority of that game. And another point that I think needs to be mentioned is when Nate Thompson, it was announced that he was coming back, you looked at those lines and you said, Paul Maurice is going through the line blender. But even though, the Jets from a possession point of view, weren't fantastic last night, but you knew that with the familiarity with Scheifele and Wheeler and Connor, what you're going to expect out of those guys. And you guys know, going back, several weeks, Stastny, Ehlers, and Kopp is a line that I've really liked. And if you look at the possession numbers, they were the Jets' best line last night. So, I thought that overall, if the Jets do have to go with those line combinations again, tomorrow in Vancouver, I wouldn't be surprised. But, you do have the off chance that Pierre-Luc Dubois is ready to go.
Well, we will know more on that, Ezzy, to your point. We'll know more on that later on this afternoon when the Jets practice in Vancouver. And if Dubois,
it's at 4 o'clock Central.
4 o'clock Central is the practice time, so 2 o'clock Pacific. So, obviously stay tuned to Dave. What's the website?
LegalCurve.com.
There you go. All the latest Jets practice news will be later on this afternoon, almost later on this evening on illegalcurve.com. We're company men. But, to your point, I mean, I would expect that Dubois gets through the practice, should get through the practice. I'd be surprised unless he has some sort of setback. I would expect him to be back in the lineup tomorrow. And then all of a sudden you have a full strength Winnipeg Jets team. The question becomes one of who comes out of the lineup if Dubois comes in tomorrow. And I would have to assume it's going to be Nate Thompson. But this is Paul Maurice we're talking about here, guys. And, he always defers to the veterans. And I could also foresee a circumstance where it's Jansen Harkins coming out of the lineup. And that's not something that I would strongly recommend if Paul Maurice was asking me, but he's obviously not.
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me, I would absolutely take Nate Thompson out over Jansen Harkins. I think Harkins has been good since he came back into the lineup, and nothing against Nate Thompson because, that was his first game in quite some time, and I thought he was pretty good. I mean, obviously didn't play big minutes, but, I also think it's going to be really interesting to see if Paul Maurice, if Dubois comes back, I should say, if Maurice moves Stastny back to the wing, right? Because we talked about, the Lowry, Appleton, Stastny line. I don't know if you're calling that the third line. I don't think you're going to be calling that the fourth line, but I think that line was really good in the couple of games that they had together, right? And even though Lowry, Appleton, and Perreault, Dave, I think you'd agree they weren't exactly at their best yesterday. I think that line is very dependable. So I think Paul Maurice definitely has some big decisions to make, but it's never a bad thing when you can put Pierre-Luc Dubois back into the lineup.
Yeah, the one thing I question is the value of doing it. If you're feeling good, if you feel like you can defeat the Canucks with the lineup that you've currently got, because if you don't put him back in, again, I'm not suggesting that they're rushing. Obviously, they're not, because they didn't put him in yesterday. If he was close, because he wasn't wearing a non-contact uniform in practice, he was wearing a regular jersey. But to me, look at the value. If he doesn't play tomorrow, the Jets don't play again until Thursday. So you're going to give him that opportunity to heal up whatever's bothering him. And again, if he's ready to go, he's ready to go. And to Drew's point, we'll know that later this afternoon. But I just think there's a big value to giving him the opportunity to be healthy and ready to go, because really you need him for the stretched run, and obviously there's a quarter of the season already done, but you can't afford to have him being hampered by something. And Blake Wheeler talked about it and his availability, because people have noticed that he's been moving better than he was. And he said that the time that he had in between games gave him that opportunity. And he said in the last 5 to 7 days, he's feeling like himself. And so I think, to me, Pierre-Luc Dubois being able to feel 100% or as close to 100% as he's going to be in a regular season, especially a condensed one, I think that's significantly important for the Winnipeg Jets. So I think that definitely will factor in for them as to whether he is a player or not tomorrow. But again, we'll know more based on how he plays in practice today.
And Dave, I wanted to throw in one more thing, guys. Like, I realized, like, Mark Scheifele, and especially with Mike McIntyre's column in today's Winnipeg Free Press, I think absolutely Mark Scheifele should be given more credit, not just here, but like across the league, right? Like, we know he's on the 9-game point streak. We know he's 4th or 5th in the entire league in scoring. What is he at? 22 points now, 21 points or 22 points.
23.
Sorry, there you go. 23. Forgot to factor in the points yesterday, Dave, but I think, and I'm not afraid to say this, I'll say it. I think he's absolutely, in the Hart Trophy discussion early on this season. That's just my opinion. But, the way he's playing right now, and I think you could argue, guys, that he's not even playing at his best, and he's 5th in the league in scoring. Like, I think he could play even better. And, we've got Wiebe coming on shortly, and he had a really good piece on sportsnet.ca recently about how Mark Scheifele's trying to really improve his all-around game. But the other guy I wanted to mention that I think, even though he doesn't have any points in those last 5 games, like Drew mentioned back pressure at the top of the show about 15 minutes ago, right? Like, Andrew Kopp, to me, is the perfect example of how a forward should play defensively. And, he got a couple of minutes on the PK yesterday, a little bit on the power play. Like, Andrew Kopp's play, to me, even though, like I said, he hasn't been racking up the points, which he was, red hot. Remember, he had the 4-point game early in the season. But like, Andrew Kopp, to me, has taken his defensive game to another level. So I think, I would have no problem if a guy like Copper stayed up on that second line with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I really like him, and I think he deserves to get those minutes.
Well, to your point, Ezzy, about playing well without necessarily racking up the points. I think if you injected Paul Maurice with truth serum and you said, what games lately have been the kind of games you want to see your team play, it would be Wednesday in Edmonton, even though it was a loss, and Friday last night against Vancouver. I think if Paul Maurice could bottle those games from a Jets perspective and replicate them night in, night out, he'd be quite happy with the Jets' performance, particularly Wednesday night, where they probably deserved a better fate in not getting at least 1 point. But it looked right. The team looked right on Wednesday, and then they looked right again yesterday with how they performed against the Vancouver Canucks. Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet is going to join us coming up here momentarily. We see him settling into his spot here. He's connecting to the audio. We'll be pleased to have Wiebe join us momentarily as soon as his audio connects. I think we got the check mark now. Kenny Wiebe, you're on mute, but as soon as you unmute yourself, I'm going to say welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show here on YouTube. How are you, handsome?
I'm well. Nice to see you emerge from that plant that was stuck behind you yesterday.
That's between two ferns with Drew Mindell on in the postgame Zoom media availability. I wanted to make sure the aesthetic looks good. That was what my concern was, in case that I'm not quite sure what the logic behind it is. Sometimes they show the media on national TV and sometimes they don't. And after our buddy Scotty Billick was getting some gears for how he looked on Wednesday night, I wanted to make sure that I looked as professional as I can be.
Yeah, I love it, and that's why I've gone with the Altona Maroons hoodie today to show on the with my friends here, the Curves.
There you go. You got to support the old the roots. Where you're going back to your baseball days, or is that your hockey days, or
This
both?
is the hockey side, yes. The Bison's on the baseball side.
Shout out to Corey Koski.
Yes, fortunate to have played against Corey for quite a few years, and one of the great human beings. As you guys know, he went a little bit further in his baseball career than I did.
But you know what?
But hold on, Wiebe, he hasn't been to as many baseball stadiums, I suspect, as you.
Well, I think he probably has. That time at the end of his career might have got him to all. You know what? I'm into the 36s now, so you might be right, Dave.
Well, there you go. Kenny, obviously brought you on to talk a little bit of Jets. Nice to see you, first of all. It's been a little while since we've had the opportunity to have you on the program, given we were with some different organizations there for a little while. But, our friendship, it can obviously overcome anything. And, Kenny, last night's performance by the Jets, I was saying this just before you popped on, sure, they only get the one goal at 5-on-5, not counting the empty netter. But, in terms of the sort of the defensive side of the game, and obviously the excellent goaltending from Laurent Brossoit, I thought that Paul Maurice would like a lot about what he saw from his team last night.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I had tuned in a little bit earlier, caught your commentary. The back pressure was fantastic yesterday. I mean, my colleague Sean Reynolds at The Athletic was talking about the ability to smother. There just wasn't a whole lot of room for the Lotto line last night. Elias Pettersson, yes, a couple of good chances, but Jets did a great job defensively, I thought. I mean, especially in the first period, until that wild and chaotic flurry at the end of the first. I mean, they had almost given up nothing. With the exception of the one backdoor chance, I think, for Pettersson, but that is a lot closer to the template than what the Jets want to be rolling out there on a regular basis. And you hit the nail on the head. It's funny. Most fans were upset with Wednesday, but if you were asking, they were also upset with Paul Maurice's reaction. But the reason why he wasn't going to expend a lot of emotional toll on it was because they played way better in a 3-2 loss than they played in a 6-5 win where they built a 4-1 lead. That was a mirage, guys. That was 4 goals on 11 shots on a night where Mike Smith was not sharp. The Jets were far too loose even before the game, well before the game became a 5-5 track meet. So for me, I think they were also much more aggressive, both in terms of back pressure, but also in terms of their defensemen and their ability to force not just at the offensive blue line, but in the neutral zone. Vancouver never really got going on their offensive attack.
And I wanted to ask you about Mark Scheifele because, not only is he on the 9-game point streak and, 5th or 4th last time I checked in NHL scoring, and you had a really good piece on sportsnet.ca talking about, how Mark Scheifele continues to want to become an all-around good player. And you mentioned in the article that this is not something that, he's just decided to become over the last year. This has been, a work in progress throughout his entire career. And we know that, he's been a point per game player for quite some time. But, I mentioned this right before you came on, is what's most amazing to you about Mark Scheifele's play this year is that it almost seems like he's not even playing at his best. It almost seems like there's more that Mark Scheifele can give. And if that's the case, then, we might see him eventually end up, top 3 in the league in scoring.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you kindly for that, Ezzy. And David, thank you for the promotion, as always, on A Legal Curve. Helps to amplify the voice for sure. In terms of Scheifele's play, bang on. And we also know early in the year, a lot of angst in Jets Nation about the defensive play and or effort of Mark Scheifele. There were certainly a couple goals where he got caught in no man's land, caught in between. Some people would say caught napping. I wouldn't go that far. I think there were just a couple of times it was more a matter of indecision. So we've definitely seen that effort level elevated. I loved what Paul Maurice had to say about this the other day. Because he got Mark Scheifele out of his comfort zone and had a bunch of different wingers with him in the early going. And even though, yes, he did go back to Old Faithful the last little bit here, having Kopp, having Ehlers on his line allowed Mark to reconnect with his own personal game. So I do agree that, again, another point that I've been trying to make here about Mark Scheifele, and I understand fans want more defensively, and that's okay. But look at the players that he is up in the scoring race with. Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Patrick Kane. These guys are not exactly Selke candidates, people. So there is always going to be a little bit of a give and take when it comes to an elite offensive player. That doesn't take a guy off the hook, guys, but it's a reminder that it's so rare when you have guys like Ryan O'Reilly, Sean Couturier, those guys that are able to perform at a high-end level at both ends of the ice. And that's not to say that they shouldn't be striving for that. And as you mentioned, Mark Scheifele has definitely shown a greater effort. And again, pointed out by Paul Maurice, going into the year, when I asked Paul about the spotlight shining on Mark in the North Division, he was the first guy to say that he embraced the opportunity to go head-to-head with Connor McDavid, with Austin Matthews. And we all know that sometimes when you go against those high-end guys, there are going to be some things that you don't like the look of what shows up on the highlight reel at the defensive end of the ice. But he's also done such an exceptional job down low in the offensive zone. His ability to, slide off checks and create offense that way is really impressive. And the other part that I wrote about, his ability to slide into the Patrick Laine spot, the Alex Ovechkin spot on that left wing side, it's gotten him way more offensive touches on the power play. And when a player like that is touching the puck more, you're into it. You're feeling so good, whether that means finding a line mate or being able to unleash a shot like we saw the other night on that vintage cross ice one-timer. I mean, he's feeling exceptionally good about his game, and for good reason. And I agree with you. I mean, the beauty of Mark Scheifele, there's always another level that he's pushing to get to.
Kenny, you always need secondary scoring, and the Jets can have sometimes secondary and third level scoring with all the talent they have. But one player who I feel has stepped up his game and really seems to have blossomed is Mason Appleton. And he's a guy who, again, earlier in the season didn't look like he had it all going all together. So what do you think it is? Do you think it's the Adam Lowry influence? What do you think it is that's really allowed that Mason Appleton to kind of get his game to that next level?
I mean, certainly helps playing with Adam Lowry, especially the level that Lowry is playing with. The reason why I chose Mason Appleton as one of those guys who could surprise is his ability to finish. He has not shown that ability up to this point on a consistent basis offensively, but there's a comfort factor knowing that he is a more established NHL player. I mean, I think we saw Jansen Harkins go through it last year a little bit, and to a degree, I think another place we're going to go, Christian Vesalainen is starting to follow in the Jansen Harkins path. But this is something that's gone on for a long time, and I draw a lot of parallels to Andrew Kopp. No, Mason Appleton's not going to be playing center, but his ability to give you a consistent game on the fourth line. You move him up to the third line, he can give you that. Oh, last year you need him to play on the right wing with Blake Wheeler for a stretch. Sign me up. I'm ready to go. The big difference for Mason Appleton this year, because he's feeling so much better, he was able to have an impact in training camp. Paul Maurice has mentioned this several times, and he's bang on. Mason was the kind of guy whose game builds during the course of the year. You pencil him in for the year after, and for whatever reason, and I don't think it was because he became complacent, Mason wasn't having that impact in training camp that you were expecting and what you saw at the end of the previous season. So this year, with the benefit of the extra training time or whatever it is, and also just Mason knowing, he's a part of the penalty kill. He's a part of this. He's been leaned on a little bit more. He was able to come in with a positive frame of mind, and also knowing that with Jack Roslovic not going to be there, he's first in line for that third line role, and he was going to make darn sure he was going to take full advantage. Let's not forget, Dave, you know this better than anybody. This is a guy that had 66 points as a professional rookie after leaving Michigan State, where he would have been the captain of the team. Probably a tough decision for him, made the right decision, immediately makes an offensive impact on that high-end Manitoba Moose team, and has now been able to find that offense. For the last 3 years, I've been saying that Mason Appleton is the type of player that can replace the offense produced by Brandon Tanev on that line with Andrew Kopp and Adam Lowry. But now he's starting to get and show it on a more consistent basis. This is a guy that can give you consistent double-digit goal scoring, but I also think he's playing with a little bit more of an edge. He's skating a little bit better. Not that he wasn't a good skater before, but he's able to impose his will a little bit more, and now he's confident. We saw it again. We saw it on the goal the other night, but we also saw it again last night. A couple times, almost, Blake Wheeler-esque not quite the same level of speed, but the ability to burn down that right wing and get a really good shot off. I think that's something that we've been seeing on a more consistent basis, and we'll see it even more as he becomes more and more comfortable.
Saturday morning, you're listening to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Ken Wiebe of Sportsnet, a good friend of ours, is our guest. We're talking about the Winnipeg Jets, last night's game in Vancouver, a Jets victory by a 2-0 margin. Of course, the rematch comes tomorrow night back in the left coast of Canada. You know, Kenny, you mentioned in your answer about Mason Appleton, you mentioned Christian Vesalainen. And if I'm Christian Vesalainen last night, boy, you know, seeing Nate Thompson in the lineup after I think I've played pretty decently for the last couple of games, it sticks in my craw a little bit. If you're Vesalainen, you know, what are you thinking in your head, and how are you getting back into the lineup so that you become the NHL regular that you think you are?
For sure. It's a great question. And you know what? It should stick in his craw, but it's all about how he responds to it in his next opportunity. I mean, we all see the strides he's making, and has he made a case to stay in the lineup? Absolutely. But he's not an established NHLer yet. There are going to be times when a veteran plays ahead of you, but that means continue to, you know, work incredibly hard in practice. If I'm Christian Vesalainen, guys, I am spending as much time with Adam Lowry and Andrew Kopp at the end of practices. If Paul Maurice says it's a prerequisite to be on special teams, I know I'm more of an offensive player, but I want to spend time with the penalty killer, because you know what? I want that penalty killing job. If that gets me an extra 3 or 4 minutes a game and gets me in the lineup, sign me up. I'm ready to go. I love what I've seen in terms of his ability to use his body along the walls. He's been much better on the walls. Dave saw this a lot last year. I was fortunate to see 2 Moose games at the end of the year. I love the chemistry between he and David Gustafsson. I want to see those 2 guys on the fourth line sooner than later. And for me, Drew, I totally understand. He would be frustrated for sure, but it's part of the deal. And I understand the immediate reaction for a lot of fans is, now you're going to tick off another player who wants to leave. Guess what? This is how it works. You have to continue to pound away and earn your job. And we can't say that Paul Maurice never puts veterans in. Look what happened with Jansen Harkins. He went from completely on the periphery of being a fringe prospect to being an NHL regular. It probably took a little bit longer than he had hoped. It's taking longer than Vesalainen had hoped. But to me, this also goes back a little bit to that first year. The other reason fans are frustrated, because this guy started in the NHL 2 years ago. And then not only did he get sent to the Moose, but then went back and forth, and then went back and played in Jokerit, skipped the World Juniors. I honestly think that development year was a major hiccup for Christian Vesalainen. Not because it was wrong to go back, but because he played in, essentially 3 different systems. And then because of the frustration with the travel, he missed out on a gold medal winning experience that would have been incredible for his career. So last year when he came to the Moose, it was almost like he was starting over, especially in the process of integrating to the North American style. And secondly, because he wasn't able to dominate offensively. As a first-round pick, the Jets and fans have seen all these guys jump in, whether it's Kyle Connor and Jack Roslovic and Mason Appleton lighting it up with the Moose, or eventually Kyle Connor becoming a consistent 30-plus goal scorer at the NHL level. Because it's taken a little longer for Christian Vesalainen, people are wondering what's up. But I think it's just a matter of time. And I mean, we were talking about Lowry and Appleton. Man, I think you could make a case that Vesalainen could be an exceptional winger with those 2 guys, given his shooting abilities. So for me, Drew, I understand the frustration, but I think it's more a matter of time for Vesalainen. But I totally understand. I mean, it's similar to the start of the year with Heinola. Everyone wants to see him right now. I would just caution that a little bit of patience, and you're going to see that player that we're all starting to envision.
Yeah, Wiebe, I think you make a lot of good points about Vesalainen. It just so happens that, you want to get Nate Thompson in, and the Jets are very deep at forward. But I agree with you. If you look at the steps that he's taken over the last year, I think he's going to be fine. And I think he will have a spot in the lineup at some point. And as you said, that could be, playing alongside Adam Lowry. And we got to talk about, Neal Pionk and Derek Forbort, Kenny, because, I know that, Pionk had a great offensive season last year, but, I'm a New Jersey Devils fan, and, I've been wanting to make this comparison for a while. And Neal Pionk to me reminds me of Brian Rafalski, like a small American defenseman who doesn't get enough credit for how good he is defensively. And you look at Pionk and, going up against, the big boys of the Edmonton Oilers and, oftentimes going up against the other team's best players. And I think, and you can, agree or disagree. I think you're probably going to agree, but I think what we've seen this year out of Pionk, especially with, his fellow, Duluthman, Derek Forbort, is that we're starting to see a more complete defenseman and a guy that's not just, good on the power play, a guy that's arguably turned into, the Jets' second best defenseman.
Yeah, and I even think that right now he's been the Jets' best defenseman, with apologies to Josh Morrissey, and that's not a knock. I think that's just a matter of there have been times when Morrissey's been trying to do a little bit too much, whereas Pionk has really embraced and settled into that shutdown role. And you're exactly right. We expected there to be some offensive upside there. Even with the Rangers, he was running the second power play unit a lot. So the fact that there was some offense there was not a surprise. The biggest question mark was on the defending side. How would he handle the defending? I had good scouting reports from outside the organization, when the trade was made in 2019, but I don't think that anybody, at least not to my recollection, told me that he was going to be on a shutdown pairing because he was viewed as more of an offensive guy. And I like the Brian Rafalski comparison. I think maybe Brian was a little bit more prolific offensively and I don't remember, I don't watch the Devils as closely as you, but shout out to the Christmas tree uniforms that are back to some degree. I think that made a lot of people Devils fans back in the day. But I don't remember. I remember Rafalski playing hard, but I don't remember him being as physical as Neal Pionk. And that element of his game was there to a degree last year, but he's definitely elevated in that area. That hit that he delivered on Leon Draisaitl down low, taking runs at Connor McDavid with regularity. I don't think that we were expecting that. To be honest, those types of plays are more Trouba-esque than Rafalski or anyone else. But I've loved the way that Neal Pionk has played. He's been absolutely outstanding and really deserves credit for his ability. Again, I remember at the start of the year when I wrote that Morrissey was, unquestionably the Jets' number one defenseman. And I got a couple of responses. Well, what about Neal and what about this? And, to be honest, right now, Pionk is playing at a little bit higher level than Josh Morrissey. And, having that, we talk about internal competition up front all the time. When you see one of your fellow defensemen playing at that level, I think it's only going to help Josh Morrissey. And I do think that Morrissey is starting to feel better on the ice. And I think that he was a big part of that defensive effort that Drew and I talked about from the very beginning. But Pionk's been awesome. And let's not forget the partner. The biggest question, there were many questions about the defense going into the year. One of them was, could Derek Forbort handle top 4 minutes? And some people, based on a little bit of recency bias, if he's on the Flames' third pairing, how can he play in the Jets' top 4? And let's not forget this guy dealt with some major back issues last year. He had been used with Drew Doughty regularly in Los Angeles on that top pairing. And we know that Doughty is used in a shutdown role. And yes, I understand some people pointed out the fact that was on a lottery team. Sure, fair point. But again, in my research in the summertime, talking to some scouts, they felt that Forbort could handle 17, 18 minutes a game. Now, are they surprised he's playing 24? Absolutely. But again, this is a first-round draft pick. He's a guy that has some talent. And again, we knew he was going to bring some stiffness to the back end and that he would help the penalty kill. But there were a few offensive plays that he made early in the year that really stood out. And the other part, when I mentioned stiffness, the exchange with Nils Höglander at the end of the game last night, the Jets are happy to have that. They don't have a lot of scrum creators, let's say. They do have some team toughness and togetherness, no doubt about that, but not a lot of them are of the imposing variety. There's no Dustin Byfuglien pulling two people out of the pack type of people on that lineup. So there's obviously chemistry between those two guys. Skating for the entire summer certainly helps, but again, in one of my other columns, not trying to self-promote here, but
you can self-promote. That's what we do best.
And you guys do enough of the promotion for me, but man, what I wrote about is like, we'll probably go to Dubois eventually here also, but the reaction was almost exactly the same from the fan base. What happened here? Jacob Trouba just had 50 points and plays in the top pairing, and all the Jets got was a undrafted college free agent. Well, that undrafted college free agent has turned into an incredibly valuable piece for the Winnipeg Jets, which is my, again, foreshadowing advice to those looking at the 19 points to 0 in the trade and saying that it's an unmitigated disaster. Let's let these things unfold and unpack a little bit before making broad declarations that maybe the general manager didn't know what he was doing. These guys are doing their research before the trigger is pulled in these deals. It doesn't always work out, but I think we're going to see a similar return from Pierre-Luc Dubois. Obviously, different style of player, but once he gets healthy, you're going to see Dubois make the same type of impact with the forward group that Neal Pionk has made to the back end.
To steal a line from my colleague, Mr. Manouk, it is an instant gratification world. So people want they want a hat trick every game for as soon as the trade is made. You know that, Kenny, as well as anybody else. Ken Wiebe of Sportsnet is our guest. You're listening to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Oh, Kenny, well, I was going to ask you about prospects, but we can ask about Pierre-Luc Dubois. That one, it works as well. Do you think that, I mean, obviously we're going to see what happens at practice this afternoon in Vancouver, and that'll factor into whether he plays tomorrow. But do you think there'll be some value to letting him sit until that Thursday game against the Habs here in Winnipeg versus getting him back in the lineup? I don't want to say potentially too early, but at least giving him that buffer zone. And long term, where do you really see him as an ideal fit in this Jets lineup?
Yeah, first and foremost, I was at the afternoon Moose game, David, yesterday. We can get to the prospects as well, several of whom I was impressed with.
Yeah.
In terms of Dubois, I heard your section about that as well. And I would say under normal circumstances, I would agree fully. And that will certainly be a consideration. For me, because he's been in a regular jersey a couple of times, but hasn't had a full practice, I would lean the other way. I think because of the quarantine process, the 3 weeks between games to begin with, I would lean towards playing Dubois because he has the extra rest. We know this has been again, the part of the frustration for fans and media is that the Jets have not been forthcoming when it comes to this injury. Paul Maurice did say that it is soft tissue. So for me, I see a groin injury. I don't know this for sure. I am not a doctor. I just play one on the internet. I feel as though it was probably a groin injury that Dubois is dealing with. So the reason why the Jets are being cautious is because with 17 games in March, if you don't take care of the groin injury for anyone who's ever had one, it lingers, and the Jets can't afford it to linger for 20 games, for 30 games. You're right. They need him for the stretch run, but they also need to integrate him as soon as they can. So I think if it had been a playoff game last night, Dubois would have played. So for me, I am, again, not a lead pipe lock by any stretch, but I expect him to play tomorrow as long as there has been no setback in the last couple of days and he comes through today's practice. I'm guessing it'll be a game time decision based on the update from the Jets. But in terms of where he fits, I want to see him with Nikolai Ehlers. I want to see him a little bit with Kyle Connor also. Going back to Scheifele, I know you guys also touched on Andrew Kopp. Kopp provides a level of security blanket for Mark Scheifele defensively. So for me, even though he plays well with Kyle Connor, obviously, we know that Paul Maurice started Kyle Connor with Pierre-Luc Dubois, so he wants to see if there's something there. For me, I want to see if there's something there with Nikolai Ehlers also. And if you put all three together, let's see what happens. But I think there can be some movement in that top six. I want to see Ehlers on that side. Dubois is a powerful skater. He is a very good creator. Because of that powerful speed and power combo, he backs defensemen off, and nobody on the Jets backs the defenseman off better than Nikolai Ehlers. So because of his shooter's mentality that he started adopting last season, I think those two could be extremely dangerous together. Then you put a straight line player with speed like Kyle Connor on the left wing, who also has incredible scoring touch and finishing ability, and also passing ability that is often deferred because of his scoring ability. I think that could be an incredibly impressive line for the Winnipeg Jets. And that's how I want to see them at least start, to see if there's some chemistry there.
Okay, Kenny, well, then I'm going to follow up and ask you about those prospects, because right now there are 5 defensive prospects. Obviously, you've got Cole Perfetti up forward, but the defensive prospects for the Winnipeg Jets right now with the Manitoba Moose, they're all playing. I mean, Johnny Kovacevic is the only one 2017 third rounder isn't, because he was suspended the last 2 games. But you've got Heinola, you got Samberg, you got Chisholm, you got Gavanke. And like I said, you got Kovacevic, and Green is injured right now. So really, you have 6 Jets defensive prospects playing with the Manitoba Moose. You watched them last night, or yesterday afternoon, against the Marlies. What kind of stood out with you with those young players?
Yeah, three quick things. Heinola obviously was my player I was probably watching most intently, and I love the fact that he's on pairing with Dylan Sandberg, who, as you saw all week, David, is incredibly comfortable on his offside. If you didn't know he was a left-handed shooter, rookie pro, you wouldn't even notice he was playing on his left side, which to me is an incredibly important development for the Jets. Lots of debate as to why it wasn't Heinola playing over on the right side, because he spent some of that game with Josh Morrissey against Ottawa on the right side himself. My theory is that in the short term, for him to get onto the Jets lineup, he will play on the third pairing with a Dylan DeMello. That's why he's playing the left side now. Again, this is just a theory from having covered the American League for 10 years and having a peek at the Jets roster. In terms of Sandberg, love the mobility. When you play with Heinola, guess what? You need to play a quiet game, because there's a lot of activity in Ville Heinola's game. And what I saw yesterday was activity in a good way. Yes, I know there were some high event shifts that led to goals against, but for me, I loved the risk reward formula yesterday. I thought he played incredibly active, but not careless. He didn't get caught. He wasn't leaving Sandberg alone on 2-on-1s. Love the Sandberg's ability to skate, move the puck. He obviously has size. He has a little bit of physical nature to his game. And the more comfortable he feels at the pro level, the more physical I think that he can be. He also has that Jacob Trouba open ice hitting ability that, again, you're not going to see it a lot now as he's getting his feet wet. But let's not forget, this is a guy who hasn't played a game since last March. So the fact that he's able to carry 20 minutes while playing against men and is not looking out of place at all is a testament to Dylan Sandberg, never mind playing on his offside. Heinola has been great for me. He's going to find a little bit of frustration at the American League level because there aren't enough elite level players on that roster. And that's not a knock on the players on the roster, incredibly hardworking, but they're more of a lunch pail crew for me, Dave, as you saw this week. There aren't as many high end or elite hockey IQ talents. Cole Perfetti is one already at 19 years old. But the other thing quickly on Perfetti, he looked like a guy who had played 4 games in 5 days yesterday. And that's not a knock on him. That just is the physical toll that is extracted from a player. But that was a reminder for me, for all the fans who were saying they wanted Cole Perfetti in the lineup now. They should have gone to the game yesterday. And again, Cole Perfetti is going to figure it out. He's going to get stronger. And even in a game where he looked a little bit tired, and again, we know it's not from a lack of preparation. It's from the fact he's a 19-year-old kid who needs to physically mature. He still was able to show off that intelligence. I love the line he was playing on yesterday with Christian Reichel and CJ Cease moving over to the wing. And there again, too, you have that security blanket. Cease being a center at the times when Perfetti's down low, Cease can handle the down low responsibilities defensively when the puck changes possession. And they did that numerous times yesterday. Perfetti had a couple great scoring opportunities. Love the way that he played, even though you could tell it was a physically taxing game. Back to the back end. You saw this here with your own eyes too. Declan Chisholm's skating ability. We knew it was strong. It is exceptional. His puck moving ability is great. His ability to walk the line laterally at this level as a first-year professional is outstanding. Yes, it's going to take time, and we've already noticed Pascal shouted it out during his post-game avail earlier this week. It's not just they knew about the offense. His ability to put in the work to get better defensively is already in bloom after 4 games in the American Hockey League. So for me, that is an incredibly important development. We know this is one of the most, again, really high-end scoring talents. It's all going to be about where Chisholm fits in. Can he run a power play at the NHL level? We know Leon Gavanka ran the Moose power play last year. Well, now he's got some competition there with both, Chisholm and Heinola, no matter how long Heinola sticks around back there. Gavanka puck moving was pretty solid yesterday. He didn't really stand out for me, but again, that's probably more to do with how good the other guys were. I don't think that Gavanka played poorly by any stretch yesterday, but I certainly noticed those other three a little bit more. And again, when I spoke to Marc-Andre Dumont for my piece on Pierre-Luc Dubois, he had a lot of great things to say about Gavanka, about his ability to learn and adapt and to push himself when there are other high-end players around him. So I expect him to continue to play well. And Kovacevic is another one of those interesting guys, Dave. I mean, pretty mobile for a big guy. I think that the Jets are always looking for, potential shutdown guys. I mean, there's some Tucker Pullman, I think, in Kovacevic, if you will. I think he could be a good, steady partner for somebody. Is he more of a depth guy, or can he become a full-time NHLer? That'll be interesting for me to see. But the last one on the D there, Samberg and Stanley. How about a Twin Towers type of pairing? If we're talking about shutdown guys. Samberg already has shown that he can play the offside. Man, those two guys could be, real physical force, but also two guys that have been pretty mobile in terms of their, taking their games to that next level.
Kenny, last question for you. Before every Jets game, you and Sean Reynolds go live on Instagram. This is a two-parter. One, did you ever think of yourself as an Instagram celebrity? And between you and Reynolds, which one is the handsome one and which one is the smart one?
Well, in my previous TV work, it was obvious that I was the diva when I was working with our good friend Sarah Orleski, and she was the seasoned professional. When it comes to Sean and I, he is the instigator, as you guys know. He does his best. I know a little bit about instigating myself on the ice, but when it comes to the off ice, I prefer the neutral ground on a lot of situations. Sean has done a really good job of spearing me in the stomach and slashing me on the wrist. But I would give him fair warning that if you asked players in the Manitoba Junior League and a few of them in the SCMHL, I know the perfect spot between elbow pad and cuff of the glove. So sometimes if you're going to instigate, you might want to be on the lookout for some retaliation. So it's been a lot of fun for sure. Sean's the one with the hair, as we know. This is nothing new for me. When I used to do moose tracks with Jim Toth, I had some hair back then in those AHL days, but I've never been, I haven't been the guy with the hair since my Jaromir Jagr days as a member of the Pembina Valley Hawks. So unfortunately for me, that was the only part of Jagr that I could duplicate, was the ability to grow a mullet in high school. So
we got to see photos of that then. If you're bringing that up, next time you're on with us, you better come equipped with a big background photo of you with a mullet.
Somebody did send me a recent photo of a Pembina Valley Hawks hockey card. It wasn't full mullet, but definitely has some hair on it, and definitely happy to share it. If you can't make fun of yourself, who can you make fun of? Great to join you guys. Thanks for having me. Wishing you obviously continued success with this platform, and as I let you know personally, certainly felt for you guys and all my friends over at the station. Obviously, I've had a long relationship over there as well. Tough time for the industry, but you guys are versatile. You're not afraid to adopt the new medium, and I know this is going to be a great venture for you guys, and I'm happy to be part of it whenever you have me on to join you.
We appreciate that, Wiebe, and I think that you're being too humble. I think you're just as handsome as Sean Reynolds.
That's very kind of you.
Bald is beautiful, Kenny. You and I. Bald is beautiful.
Got to embrace it. Got to embrace it.
That's right. Kenny Wiebe of Sportsnet. You know how to follow his work on Twitter at Wiebe's World, and of course everywhere on sportsnet.ca and on Instagram before every Jets game alongside Sean Reynolds. Kenny, thank you. You gave us a lot of your time this morning, and we appreciate it, brother.
My pleasure, guys. Enjoy the rest of the show and have a great weekend here.
Take care, Kenny.
You too, Ken.
There he goes. Ken Wiebe of Sportsnet joining us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Ken was shooting some fire today.
I liked it. I like a fired up.
Wait, Ken's still here. This is awkward. I'm trying to be complimentary.
There he goes.
And he's still there.
No, he's gone now. But I like Kenny when he's bringing the heat. That's very true there, Dave. Let me just do a quick read for our sponsors. We remind you, of course, to help support the Illegal Curve sponsors because they keep this show coming each and every week for you. This segment brought to you by Dr. Les Reikus and the team at Linden Market Dental Center, official dentist of Illegal Curve Hockey. Don't be an Ezzy. Always wear a mouth guard and give yourself peace of mind protection, as well as facial, teeth, and mouth protection. To make an appointment to get your teeth to ting, visit lindenmarketdentalcenter.com. Lots of great conversation happening in the YouTube chat. We encourage you to check that out. Just subscribe to our channel, youtube.com. Just search for Illegal Curve Hockey, search for Illegal Curve Radio. Subscribe, hit that subscribe button, smash that subscribe button, and you'll be notified each and every time when we are live and when we post all the post-game video on youtube.com on our YouTube channel. Still to come on this morning's program, the lawman Gary Lawless is going to join us, and our buddy Anthony Sanfilippo, he's going to join us from Philadelphia. Much more to come. We're going to talk right now, though, about Neal Pionk and the performance of the Jets defenseman so far this season, really stepping up his game to another level. We knew the offense was there based on what he did last year, but I think the defense and the physicality is what is surprising so many of us right now. And he's going to cash in big time, given that he is, of course, a restricted free agent at the end of the season. Let me start with you, Dave Minuk. I guess to start with sort of just a general thought on the performance of Neal Pionk and what we've seen from his development so far this season.
Well, I mean, I think we've seen a player who's picked up where he left off. I mean, I think he's a guy who, and Ken made a very good point. I mean, if everyone recalls what happened when that trade went down, we don't need to really go back that far, but the truth is, when that trade went down, people were like, what the hell just happened? You just gave up Jacob Trouba for, as Ken said, an unsigned college free agent draft pick or signer. And so you're thinking to yourself, last year, was that an anomaly? Is that what you're coming to expect? Because of course the numbers in New York weren't very good, but that New York team was atrocious. So he looked like he's just picked up where he left off. He looked like a guy who's going to get paid. Let me tell you that. He's definitely going to get a very nice bump in salary next season. But he's a guy, I think his points projection, if he was playing a full season, would be somewhere in the 70-point range right now, based on what he's done if you extrapolate it. And I just think he's a guy who's added an element. And it's interesting, like Murat attested in The Athletic had a piece about Pionk and about his, quote, mean streak and him being a kind of a nasty player. And again, Pionk isn't a big guy. We think of him as a mobile defenseman, like, as he said, more of a Rafalski than a Stevens. And to me, we're seeing a guy who's really bringing that more physical element. We're seeing a guy going for those open ice hits that we really haven't come to expect from him. So I think he's become to Kenny's point, I think he's right now the top defenseman on the Winnipeg Jets. And perhaps, the comfort with Derek Forbort has really meant a lot for him. The Duluth brotherhood, as you will. And I talked to Dylan Sandberg about, that idea of players having comfort being with guys that they're familiar with. So that's a good thing as well. And whoa, we got another big guest right here, Gary Lawless.
We'll keep talking about Neal Pionk a little bit later on in the show, but joining us now, Gary Lawless, the lawman, joins us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. He's putting in his headphones, so we'll let him get set up there before he hits that unmute button. I can see the smirk quickly appearing on Gary's face because it's been a long time, lawman. How are you, brother?
Great. You've got a beard.
Yes.
Ezra has a beard. Dave looks handsome as ever. That's all I'm going to say.
What do you have on your face there? You got a little bit of gray going on there, my friend.
Yes, I'm auditioning for Santa Claus. So
you got to come back to Winnipeg and get the snow. Then you don't get that in Vegas, but I guess Lake Tahoe is where the NHL's just out your window there.
Snowing right now. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
We saw the photos, of course, earlier in the week or yesterday. The photos were flying all over Twitter. It just looks like an absolutely beautiful setup there on the golf course overlooking the lake for today and then tomorrow. Of course, the two Lake Tahoe outdoor games that the NHL is putting on this season.
Yeah, I'm actually working for NHL Network this weekend as well, so I'm staying for the whole weekend. So I'll do the radio broadcast with Dan Duva today for the Golden Knights and Avalanche game, and then I'll do some NHL Network stuff after the game, and then tomorrow I'll do NHL Network stuff surrounding the Bruins and the Flyers. So we got here on Thursday evening, so didn't go over to the rink Thursday night, but Dan and I took a shuttle over early yesterday morning before the Golden Knights practice. And first of all, like, this Edgewood Resort is really beautiful. You turn in and it's this beautiful winding driveway and a big clubhouse, and you get out, walk around the corner, and there is I didn't know where to look. To my left is Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains, and Dave, Lake Tahoe's got nothing on Lake Winnipeg except for the mountain.
Yeah, little mountain there.
And then to your right was the setup for the rink, and we've all been to outdoor rinks before and played on them, and and you've seen the commercials for beer companies. They stage those mountain lake rinks, and they're very impressive. But this was the greatest outdoor rink I'd ever seen. Like I as I got closer, Winnipeg's Derek King, who builds who's in charge of ice for the NHL. You guys will remember him. He worked at Winnipeg Arena. He goes back that far, and then worked at MTS Center doing the ice for the Moose and the Jets before the NHL snatched him away. Pardon me, guys. So he's on the ice. There's Zambonis whirling around. They've got these two huge chalets on one side, this big scoreboard that they've built, and our radio position is on the side where those chalets are, looking across at where the players' benches are and beyond to the lake. And if you sit on the right angle, you look over the boards and you look over the far board, and it's like an infinity pool because it goes straight from the board to the lake. And then there's this drone starts whizzing around. NBC has a drone there that they're going to use for the footage today. It's just then the players, they started coming down. Vegas had practiced first, and both teams did the same thing. They wore their game uniforms and toques for a team picture. Then they took the game jerseys and toques off. The equipment guys handed them practice jerseys and helmets, and then they had their practice. But like when they came down, Keegan Colasar from Winnipeg was one of the first guys to come down, and he was in the reverse retro red, and he had the toque on, and it was just they just looked so great. And then you're like, I don't know if you guys coach minor hockey or something. Like I haven't been. I go to my daughter's practices, and I'm down at the ice level. But for the NHL, I've spent the last 20 years sitting like at the top of the building, and there you're right there, right against the glass. And Ryan Reeves, of course, he skates by, sees me there, takes the stick, slashes it against the glass. I'm like, I jump, but I wasn't expecting it. Then once the guys saw that, they started firing pucks at the glass. So it really cool. And then Colorado, they had some things have never changed, guys. You asked me one question and I don't stop talking.
That's okay. It makes our jobs a lot easier, Gary.
Keep going.
Colorado had their reverse retro jerseys are the Nordiques logo, but in the Avalanche colors, and they looked. I'm partial. I like the Vegas. I like their reds better, but it was the Colorado ones really, really beautiful as well.
And Lawman, I want to jump in here because on that topic of the reverse retro jerseys of both the Avalanche and Golden Knights look awesome. Let's get it right out there that the gold helmets are fantastic. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not going to hear any arguments. Those gold helmets rule. So I want to get that. Right off the bat.
Let me guess. Ezra likes them. Drew hates them. And Dave has a measured approach. I'm not sure yet.
How can you hate those? I don't understand. Honestly, Lawman.
That's true.
I think they're too much. I mean, Gary, you know us pretty well. You know us pretty well.
This is Vegas, baby. Come on.
Vegas, Drew. There's no such thing.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Too much. They're awesome. They're beautiful. But
I was on board with the white gloves and I was on board with the jerseys, but to me, the gold helmets it was almost like they were a little too shiny. And now if you need me, I'm going to go outside and scream at a cloud like the old man that I am.
Well, people forget that the LA Kings, when they played Colorado at Air Force last year, they wore the silver chrome ones. and in their outdoor game. So we're not the first ones to do it. With Mike Altieri, the great communications czar for the LA Kings, when I was tweeting about it, he's like, hey, remember whose idea this was? Because my take on it is this. And I think we can, I'm looking at you fine gentlemen through the Zoom, and you are the same as me. None of us knows anything about fashion. So let's not pretend that we do, okay? We are not style meisters. But what I like about it, and it's what I like about the Golden Knights, they try stuff.
Absolutely.
They're not afraid to walk out on a limb. Like, you remember the backlash in 17-18 when people saw the opening for our games. A lot of people hated it. You know who loved it? New fans and kids.
Yep.
They were riveted by it. And last time I checked, we're 4th out of 4, and we're trying to move up. So do we go too far? I don't think so. Some people might, but I think other teams could go a little farther. That's all I'll say.
I agree, Lawman. And, we want to get into the game this afternoon between the Golden Knights and Avalanche, two of the best teams in the league. I wanted to just sticking with what you were talking about with Lake Tahoe. And I think, we would all agree, and everybody that has seen the visuals would agree that they're absolutely stunning with, the water in the background and the mountains. And what I wanted to ask you was, going forward, because we know there's going to be many more outdoor games, do you think the NHL is going to look at either having more games at Lake Tahoe or other types of I'm not sure if we're talking golf courses, but, traditionally we've seen these games in football stadiums, but I saw a picture of the setup at Lake Tahoe, and it actually looked like a painting. Like it looked like it almost looks like what your dream outdoor game would look like. So do you think that this is going to be the norm going forward, that we're going to see these types of games maybe, in a place like Lake Louise or other places like that?
Gary Bettman will get an email on Monday from someone in his office that is in charge of getting the TV numbers for things like this. And if the TV number is monstrous, then it will be, okay, there's something here. How do we do this again? Now, they could have done limited seating here. Like, don't forget COVID. COVID's the reason they're doing it in the first place, but they could have done limited seating. You guys are all CFL fans. We've all seen those temporary stadium seats that they put up. They did it at the old Winnipeg Stadium. They did it at Taylor Field in Regina, or what did they call it at the end? Is it Mosaic Stadium? Maybe, I'm not sure. Anyways,
Mosaic Stadium.
Yeah, we've all seen those temporary stands. They cost about $600 a seat to erect. So, if you're charging $1,000, $1,500 a seat, and you put up 5,000 seats at one of these events, there's another way to still make it intimate, still be able to go to incredible vistas. And I think this was a great idea. I think this was turning a disadvantage into an advantage. I think the NHL has done an incredible job in that regard. Whether or not it's something that continues, we'll wait and see. We still here, guys?
Yeah, Drew's muted me on Gary. He tries to limit how much I can say, so I had to unmute myself.
You let Drew have charge of that?
I know. Unfortunately, it's his. He set up the Zoom. We're going through something right now. We'll figure it out.
Look. If it wasn't me, what are our options?
Well, it's not Ezzy.
You could bring Remus out of a legal curve retirement.
Yeah, no, Remus has got a kid now, Gary. He's got different priorities altogether.
Gary, the option is we get rid of Drew.
I actually think that's hilarious that Remus has a kid. It's like a 4-year-old parenting.
You know who doesn't think it's hilarious? His wife.
No, the real question, Gary, is what's funnier, Remus having a kid or Ezzy having 2 kids? That's the illegal curve question of the day.
Ezzy has the biggest heart in Winnipeg. I bet you he's a tremendous, tremendous father. And if he's not,
I appreciate that, Lawman.
Naomi would kick his ass.
It's true.
Yes. Gary, you're not a born Winnipegger, but you may as well be called a Winnipegger because you spent so much time here. You developed so many relationships here. But what is that like being within that Vegas organization? Because there are so many Manitoba connections, both at the NHL level and the AHL level.
It is interesting. So I'm from Peterborough, Ontario, and there was a time when Peterborough was kind of like this NHL factory. The Peterborough, there was great hockey players from Peterborough. And then, of course, there was the Peterborough Petes.
Mhm.
And, you know, I can remember early on in my writing career, I was in Chicago for a Moose versus Wolves game. Dallas Aikens, who's from Peterborough, was referee, was the captain of the Moose. No, sorry, he was playing for the Wolves. Ryan Reddy, another kid from Peterborough, was playing for the Moose. Dean Morton was the referee. I went to kindergarten in Peterborough with Dean, and I was upstairs writing, and it was all these Peterborough connections, and that's kind of what I always saw. Well, now I lived in Winnipeg for 18 years, and my family still is lucky enough to have a place on Lake Winnipeg. So my daughter, you know, like I hear Winnipeg 4 times a day. Like it's, you know, they had this in Winnipeg. They don't have this in Vegas. They have this. She loves Winnipeg. Don't get me wrong. She's still got an old beat up Jets t-shirt that every once in a while I'll sneak into her room and have to take off her back when she's sleeping and put a Golden Knights t-shirt on her. She gets conflicted sometimes, which I'm proud of. She's loyal to her hometown. Anyways, she's a Golden Knights fan at heart. Now it's Manitoba connections. And so, and it's funny, Dave, it struck me yesterday. I looked out, and at one point in time, Stone, Glass, and Colasar. Who am I missing? I'm missing somebody, I think. We're all
Ryan Reeves.
Ryan Reeves.
Yeah.
We're all kind of, you know, and I thought I wanted to stop them and ask them what all their community clubs were, so that I could kind of tweet, you know, this is just like, so Reeves is from what's his neighborhood there?
Fort Garry Lawman.
Yeah, okay, and
because he went to SJR, so
yeah, Glass told me the other day,
I think
Red River Community Center, I think he said where he skated outdoors. I don't know where about Stone, and Colasar is from he's from Kildonan as well. So anyways, it just, you know, and then Kelly McCrimmon up behind us, and Shane Nidey from Neepawa, but also everyone knows him in Winnipeg as well. He flew in yesterday. He did a clinic with a bunch of police officers last night on the ice in Tahoe, and he's in a shuttle right now going to Reno. They just opened a new rink in Reno, and he's doing a kids clinic there this morning. So and then Darren Millard, who's the host of our TV show, he's a Manitoban. I could go on and on and on. Von Karpen, one of our, you know, head of our pro scouting, Mick McCrimmon, Kelly's son, one of our pro scouts. Like it's if someone needs a halubshi recipe, they can get it from the Golden Knights organization.
Gary Lawless is our guest. You're listening to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We are live both on YouTube, and of course, remember to subscribe. Smash that subscribe button. Don't miss a minute when we are live on YouTube, and of course, subscribe to the podcast. Get it delivered to your device automatically each and every week. You know, Gary, here in Winnipeg, so much of the focus, of course, has only really been on the North Division. You forget that there's other teams, and it's almost been like a bit of an afterthought, and that's unfortunate. But of course, I think that's just a function of the COVID scheduling that we're facing. What's it like, you know, in Vegas? Is it a similar phenomenon where basically, you know, it's the Pacific Division or bust, and almost nothing else that's going on in the league is really resonating, I would say?
Well, I'm just trying to subscribe to the podcast. I don't, because I used to listen on, I would tune in on the app when you're on the radio station. So I want to make sure that, there you go. I just subscribed.
There you go.
Excellent. People are like, so the TV ratings in Vegas are through the roof, right? Like it's right now, I believe we're third in the United States behind only Pittsburgh and Buffalo. And our numbers are ahead of, they're beyond what they were last season. And they're our best numbers ever for regular season. So people are certainly paying attention to the Golden Knights. You know, Vegas is I would call Edmonton a hockey town. I would call Toronto a Toronto Maple Leafs town. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit different. I believe Winnipeg is a hockey town. I think Vegas right now is a Golden Knights town. Will it become a hockey town? They're sure trying, you know, like my daughter has gone through learn to skate, learn to play, Little Knights, and now she's in house league and skating with the Vegas Junior Golden Knights team as well. So she's gone through the whole development there. They built 2 pads in Summerlin where we practice and have our offices. They bought an American League franchise, built 2 pads in Henderson. They're building a main rink. Right now, the Silver Knights are playing at the Orleans. The Orleans April Wine plays there every Canada Day. It's kind of a cool place. I love driving by the marquee there because they have a lineup of all these Canadian acts.
That's where they have the curling. They have the Canada Cup curling tournament there.
You're correct. And so that now they're building in Henderson another facility for that. And I've already heard, like my daughter skates 4 times a week. She skates twice in Summerlin and twice in Henderson. And now you already hear people talking about we need more ice. They just built this rink in Reno. So I think that, I think it's really catching on here. So
if she's skating 4 times a week, is she going to represent Canada at the Winter Olympics, or is she going to represent the United States at the Winter Olympics?
She's a Canadian, and let's hope she's better than her old man, or there'll be no chance of her skating for Canada. That's for sure. So it's catching on. I think. I think I'm an atypical viewer. I come home at night and I have the center ice package, and I'll be honest, I love watching Dennis Bayak do his thing. So if the Jets are on, I'm tuning into that, and I still, I have a lot of friends in the Jets organization. I still pay attention to the team. It's still fascinating to me what they've been able to do and what they're going to do. And Toronto is kind of, Toronto and Edmonton when they play, it's kind of appointment television. It's must watch. They don't really like to play defense up there in Canada, which is really kind of odd, right? Because you think of teams that represent Canada. How do they win at the Olympics and the World Cup? And they're better defensively than everybody else. They grind, they check. Hey, man, like there's no checking north of the border right now. It's something else. There are some real interesting issues about this. We know that there's a concentration of hockey media in Canada, and how much attention are they paying to the rest of the league? Like, I'll tell you what, when they announce all the award winners at the end of the season, they better not all come from the North Division. And although right now Austin Matthews is taking them all home, so maybe that will be the case. But it's there are things to like about this, and hey, this is the situation we're in. I hate it. I'm not coming to Winnipeg twice this year. I'm not going to New York City. On and on and on. I like going to every building in the league. I like seeing every team in person. I like talking to every coach in the league, all of those things. And now it's, I don't like the Coyotes jerseys enough to have to look at them 8 times.
I agree with you on that one, Lawman. And Lake Tahoe and Vegas aren't bad, though. I gotta throw that in there in terms of not being able to travel to all the arenas. But sticking on the topic of the hardware, I can't believe it's taken us this long to get around to Marc-Andre Fleury, because if he keeps playing like this, he's going to give Connor Hellebuck a run for his money for the Vezina Trophy, and he's going to get the start for the Golden Knights this afternoon. And I believe it's Philip Grubauer getting the start for the Avalanche. But obviously, we want to talk about Fleury. We know the numbers: 7-2. I think it's a .935 save percentage, goals against.
937 this morning.
There you go.
And a 1.56 goal.
There you go. And just incredible, right? Because when you consider Leonard signed the contract with the Golden Knights, and we thought there was a chance that Fleury might get traded, the question I had for you is just, is it something that really shouldn't surprise us about Fleury? I mean, he's got the Stanley Cups. He's been so good for Vegas. You go back to that 2018 run. I mean, he's basically single-handedly the reason why, the Jets, didn't get past the Golden Knights. Obviously, the rest of the team was pretty good. But,
as he.
No, I'm joking. Fleury
Those are Arctic blue glasses. Arctic blue colored glasses you're wearing this morning.
Gary, I can mute him if you want. I have the power. I can mute him.
Don't mute me. No, but in all seriousness, I mean, is this just not what we should have expected from Fleury? Because he's a guy that's, he's going to be a Hall of Famer most likely. So, but just can you talk about how incredible he has been for this Golden Knights team with Leonard, currently injured?
Yeah, well, not most likely. Like he's climbing the wins. He's going to finish like third or fourth in all-time wins. Marc-Andre Fleury's going to the Hall of Fame without question, and first ballot, first opportunity, he'll go in. I think a couple of things. I think last year it was not a great year for him. Statistically, his numbers were not as good as they had been. I think he was over, because of the lack of balance the team had in net. Really, since he arrived in Vegas, he was overused, and that was not a knock on anybody. It just was the reality. If the team was going to win, they needed to play Marc-Andre Fleury, and that's the NHL that's not the way the NHL works anymore. Not with the travel, not with the I talked to Brian Boucher about this yesterday in the lobby here, and he's like, "Are you kidding me? Like every night there's a guy in that other lineup that drives you nuts, right? You know what I mean? It's Vancouver has Peterson. We know who Edmonton has. We know who Winnipeg has. Toronto has Matthews. It just on and on and on and on. There's no off nights. Every night there's a guy in that lineup that is like, and there's parity. Every game is close. The points are so important. The mental strain on a goalie playing 55 plus games just doesn't. And then the travel and the wear and tear. It doesn't. The fact that the best way to score in the NHL is to be right on top of the goalie and to be bumping them and shoving them and working them all night. Like it just, Tuukka Rask said it before the bubble last year. Him and Halak had that great tandem going, and he just said, he goes like, the future is, 45, 35, something like that. And I like Fleury is fresh. Now he's had this run now because Leonard is injured, and really, I think he's let in one goal that he probably doesn't like all year. It came in his last game, and that was he'd been overworked. So now I expect him to be tremendous today. He's been off since Tuesday. He's going to be fresh again. They need to get Leonard back, and DeBoer is pretty committed to going with this rotation, and I think he should be. To me, I'd run it as far as you can, even into the playoffs. I think it makes sense to if you have $12 million invested in goal, it has to be an advantage. You got to use that advantage. They've got two world-class goalies. Like if you're picking Team Canada right now, Fleury has to be in the conversation, and Leonard is in the conversation for Sweden without question. So you got two of the best on best goalies in the world. Use them. And let's not overthink this, guys. 29 tonight, 90 tomorrow, and let's go.
There's no question, Gary. It's a good problem to have when you have two goaltenders of that caliber. We'll let you go, but before we do, of course, we sort of have to pay tribute, for lack of better terminology, to where we all got together for the first time. And it was over a decade ago at 1290. We were there, and then you and Huss came over, and the bond that we all created, I think, for a long time there. And obviously you've moved on to Vegas since then, and are doing tremendously well. But you go back and all those fun times, and our buddy Anthony Sanfilippo from Philadelphia is going to come up here in about 10 minutes or so, and the times where we would hang out with the Flyers beat writers in the draft in Philadelphia, and all those fun times that we all had together. I'd be remiss to not make mention of that, and it all does start with what happened at that radio station. And it's good to see you, old friend, and you're doing well, and we're so happy to see you.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say that I'm proud of you guys because, it's not my position. Like we're colleagues, you know what I mean? I'll say it this way: I'm extremely proud to call you friends, to have been on your show a few times, to have been a part of what we built. We were part of building over at that place. That the news that came out. Hit me right between the eyes, and it was really, really, for me, it was, I thought about Hustler. I worried about Hustler. What's he going to do? Where's he going to go? And I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't worry about you guys for a second. I knew that you would figure something out, and that you would, I knew you wouldn't miss a beat. And I know Hustler isn't going to either. he'll return in a bigger and better form without question. But it just for this program, I knew was going to be, you guys are innovators. You've created one of the coolest magazine shows in the hockey world, like without question. You guys know, you guys get the texts from me. I listen all the time. It's a great program. I love you all. I'm glad to see your faces. Stay warm, and I hope to see you again soon.
We'll do it. We'll do it at the lake and on the shores of Lake Winnipeg next time, Gary.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
And if I could just conclude this with illegal curve sandwich for life.
Ezra, you know what? You've got some Myers,
yeah.
Lawless deli crumbs.
Little honey mustard in here somewhere.
Don't pretend you don't cheat, Ezra. There's pictures of you sneaking in at Myers in a trench coat with a ball cap pulled down low, saying, "I'll have a H&L, please."
No, it's true. I do go see Harrison at Myers every once in a while just to get.
They're both great places.
Yeah.
You know what?
Exactly.
I love Bernstein's. I love Myers. I love everything today. What happened
There
to
you
Gary?
go.
What happened to Gary? He's warm and fuzzy all of a sudden.
It's
Deli
a
wars are
jovial
over.
celebration. Gary, we'll let you get ready for the broadcast. Enjoy. Thanks for joining us this morning. There he goes. Gary Lawless joining us here. We're live on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. And I guess that leads me seamlessly into doing a quality read for our sponsor, Bernstein's Deli. Of course, the official deli of Illegal Curve Hockey and home of the Illegal Curve Sandwich. Located in the Cordon Village Mall, Bernstein's Deli has been Winnipeg's deli destination for over 30 years. For more information, find them on Facebook or at bernsteinsdeli.com. Remember, Bernstein's is there, whatever format you need. If you want curbside, they got curbside. If you want delivery, they have delivery. However you need it, whatever you need, Bernstein's Deli is there to help you out. Check them out online at bernsteinsdeli.com.
If you want an illegal curve sandwich, I will walk through 5 feet of snow to get you that sandwich. We will get it to you.
You are loyal, if nothing else, there, Mr. Ginsberg. Before Gary joined us, we were talking, Dave, about Neal Pionk and his performance. And the question I have, I mean, he's obviously, the offensive numbers are there. The defensive game is rounding into form as well, and probably exceeding everybody's expectations. His contract, it's going to be a big contract coming up, in this offseason. Do you think he's going to exceed what Josh Morrissey got, the 8 years and $50 million, or is it going to be right around that dollar figure? How do you think the contract negotiations are going to shape out with between Pionk, given his latest performance?
Well, I mean, Drew, the funny part is last year you could say, is it an anomaly? Is it a one-off? Is that just a phenomenal performance? But when you're able to keep that rolling and start to exceed your expectations, then you start to say, well, there's something there. That's not a one-hit wonder. This is trying to think of a good one-hit wonder reference. I can't think of one, but the truth is, what's the song though? Was that yeah, exactly. So you got to think of the name of the song. That's the whole point.
Now you're going to make me do some Googling is what you're going to make me do.
Exactly. Well, I kind of expected Desi actually to come up with something. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The point is you got Neal Pionk, who's an RFA. So, I mean, the Jets still have a measure of control. He makes $3 million this season. And yeah, his number is going to be a big number. I mean, I just don't think there's any question about it because he really is showing that, he is a solid defenseman. I mean, I don't think he's going to be making $8 million next year, but I mean, I definitely see that he's probably going to be, in that Josh Morrissey number. And again, in terms of years, I mean, he's not an old guy, right? He's 25 years old, so he's got a number of, he's kind of in that prime of his career, and that's what the Jets are looking to buy. So, I haven't broken it down to see exactly what his number will be, but again, you got to think that you're getting a steal right now at $3 million, and his number will be, I suspect, it's got to be north of what would you say, at least $6 million.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that high, but I would say that.
Why isn't it that high then? I mean, you look at everything he's doing. He's putting up big numbers offensively. His numbers, his defensive game is improving. So, if he was a UFA and he's not that far away from unrestricted free agency. Why wouldn't his number be, why wouldn't his number be up over $6 million? I just don't see why he's not considered, maybe not elite, but not far from elite.
Well, you'd have to look at the comparables, and it's possible that his number comes in $6 million. I don't know if he's going to get an 8-year deal. Look at how young Josh Morrissey was when he signed that deal, right? It's a different type of player. Pionk wasn't drafted by the Jets. So, again, I think he'd probably be closer to around $5 million a year. But you would have to go and look at some comparables. But there's no doubt that Neal Pionk has raised his value so far this season.
No question about that. And we'll talk more about that. But first, we're going to welcome in our next guest. It's a good friend of ours. He covers the Philadelphia Flyers for crossingbroad.com. Anthony Sanfilippo joins us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Anthony, it's good to see you, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. I didn't think we were going to have an opportunity to talk this year, with you guys playing in the Canadian division and us playing in the East. I didn't think that there was going to be, normally I join you guys a couple times a year when the Jets and Flyers get together, but I'm glad you guys reached out. It's cool to see you guys in person, I guess, through my computer, as opposed
Anthony,
to just talking
you can't get rid of us. There's no way you can get rid of us. You're
I know.
Stuck with us for life.
Well, I have a funny story for you real quick. As you guys know, I dealt with COVID last month, and the day that I left the hospital, the orderlies wheeling me out in a wheelchair out to the car for the ride home. And as they're wheeling me out, because I spent 11 days in the hospital, the nurses played the Rocky theme as I was leaving through the sound system in the hospital. And I turned to the orderly and go, I feel like I'm on Illegal Curve. And he goes, what? And then I realized who I was talking to. I said, never mind. Forget it. Never mind. But anyway.
The orderly at the hospital doesn't know about us?
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, they're too busy doing something else, like saving people's lives and dealing with a mass pandemic than listening to us. Hard to believe.
Crazy.
But, I gotta say, Anthony, you mentioned that you dealt with COVID, and I read your story about it on crossingbroad.com, and it's so good to see you healthy and up and seemingly back at it. And I mean, it sounded like it was a harrowing experience. And like I said, it's so good to see you. Not in person, of course. Soon enough, it'll be in person again.
That's right.
But, at least via the computer.
Thanks, Drew. I appreciate that. Yes, it was harrowing. The first night, especially. I mean, I was listed in critical condition that first night, but everything got better, day by day. And here I am 5 weeks since, and I feel, close to 100%. I got a couple small little breathing things that I still have to do. But I'd say I'm probably about 90, close to 95% at this point. And within a couple weeks, I'll be completely back to myself. So it's great. It's great to be where I'm at. And I'm fortunate. I certainly am at this juncture. So.
That is good to hear. I mean, the Flyers as a franchise and as a team have certainly been going through their COVID tribulations, and they're obviously playing in one of the Lake Tahoe games this weekend. But this is not a full strength Flyers team. If they weren't playing in this marquee game, do you think they'd be back on the ice, or do you think that that maybe accelerated the timeline a little bit from the NHL's perspective?
A lot of people ask that question, and I understand it, right? I mean, because you have this big game on national television, and the league's been promoting it and stuff, but I can't imagine that the league would want a depleted roster. So I don't think that they're rushing the Flyers back just to get them into this game, minus Claude Giroux, Jake Voracek, Travis Konechny, Oscar Lindblom, who was a great story, obviously, that people would want to talk about and hear about nationally. So I can't imagine that the league looks at this and sees it as a bonus, right? So in that regard, I don't think that they were rushed back. I think that they got to a point where they had no more players or staff going into the protocol. And it was just like, okay, well, we've had several days in a row of negative tests. We can kind of get back at it. Plus, they had already lost all those games, 4 games. You're not going to add more to it. The schedule's a mess as it is. I mean, you guys see every day what the NHL schedule looks like. Trying to sneak more games in just because the Flyers have a number of players on that COVID list. I mean, that's what this taxi squads for and everything else. I don't think the NHL rushed them at all. It's unfortunate that the guys are missing, but I don't think they were rushed at all.
Anthony, wanted to ask you about, James Van Riemsdyk, but also, ask you about some of the players that you feel, are going to have this opportunity with, as you mentioned, Giroux, Voracek, Travis Konechny out of the lineup. But, just first with James Van Riemsdyk, it's a player that I've always really liked. And, I think you'd agree last year, maybe there was some points of the season where he was a little bit inconsistent, but he still had, I believe, 19 goals. But this year, can you imagine how the Flyers would be doing if they didn't have James Van Riemsdyk playing at a point per game clip? Because I think he's one player that you didn't necessarily see taking a step back to, where Van Riemsdyk was maybe, 4 or 5 years ago with the Leafs.
Yeah, no, he's certainly been a surprise in that regard, but even more so it's been that he's been great in his own end. And he's creating a lot of chances for whatever line he's playing on. And he's been a little bit of a wild card because of injuries and the like. I mean, first they were missing Couturier, and then they had other guys out of the lineup. And so Van Riemsdyk's bounced from first line to third line to second line. So he's been all over the place. And everywhere he goes, he's really taken to heart what Alain Vigneault's asked him to do, which is, look, you bust it in your own end, and then you have the freedom to be creative in the offensive end. And I think it's a really good mix right now for him. And if you watch games, there's a lot of times where he's poking pucks at the blue line and using that reach and or bodying a guy off, because he's a bigger guy. And he's never been known as a physical player. He's been known as a good puck possession guy because he's strong and big, but not in the defensive end. He's always kind of been a little bit more passive. He's a different player this year, and by far has been their most valuable player through the first 14 games that they've played. And it's not even close. Without James Van Riemsdyk right now, the Flyers are probably not sitting tied for second in the East Division.
Anthony, Winnipeg-based show, even though we're, out on the internet, but we still have to ask about Manitoba players. Got to ask about Nolan Patrick, obviously after everything that happened to him last season. What does it look like for him this season?
I don't know what the deal is with Nolan. I've never gotten it, Dave. I'll tell you what, I know that the Flyers, when they were talking with Winnipeg about Patrick Laine and Roslovic, I know that Patrick was part of that deal that Chuck Fletcher was offering. What I had heard, it was Patrick and Konechny for Laine and Roslovic was what I had heard, and that the Jets came back to the Flyers and said, replace one of them with Provorov and we have a deal. And Chuck Fletcher said, no, I'm not giving up Provorov. And so then, they went back to Columbus at that point, and then that got the deal done there. So if the Flyers are willing to move on from Nolan Patrick, now granted, that's a big deal, right? I mean, it's not like it was for peanuts. It's not like they were just dumping him off. It lets you know that they're a little concerned as well. He's not been great. He's not been terrible, but here you got a guy who, with all these players out of the lineup, all these, top end talent forwards out of the lineup, and Nolan Patrick's your fourth line center, right? Tells you a little bit of something about where the Flyers think that he's at right now as a player. And maybe he'll figure it out. But, I every time I watch him play, I wish he was using more. I think it's that he's got a lot of gifts, but he just doesn't know how to use them. He's one of those types of players, right? And that maybe he figures it out later when he's more mature, when he's late 20s, and maybe it clicks for him then because he's so talented. It's just that he doesn't at this point know how to, harness those talents.
You're listening to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Our guest is Anthony Sanfilippo. You can read Anthony's work at crossingbroad.com. He covers the Philadelphia Flyers. A good friend of ours when travel happened. There's certainly a night out with Anthony and Illegal Curve was usually a recipe for some hijinks at the very least.
Yes.
And I think the hijinks is probably the nicest way we can describe that. Anthony, I got to, down your in-state rivals, the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, there's almost, you think about people who symbolize the Philadelphia Flyers, and it's Bobby Clark comes to mind, and, Ron Hextall certainly comes to mind as well. Just how bizarre is it thinking that Ron Hextall is going to be leading the Pittsburgh Penguins and presumably trying to defeat the Philadelphia Flyers on a regular basis.
So I'm going to tell you, it's really bizarre to me. I grew up in the Hextall era, right? So when I was a Flyers fan, Ron Hextall was the goalie. And so, to see the first bizarre thing for me that happened with Hextall was when he was first back in Philly. We were in Detroit, and he up in the press box in Detroit, he saw Chris Chelios, and they shook hands and patted each other on the back. And I was like, a little bit of my childhood died inside of me at that point. So when I'm working now, let's fast forward 6-7 years ago, I'm working for the Flyers, and I'm doing this video thing where we're talking about the Flyers-Penguins rivalry, and I'm talking to Hextall, and he's telling me how much he hates the Penguins, how much that team bothers him so much. When he, as a player, even afterwards, they drive him crazy. And now he's their general manager, with Berkey, of all people, as the president of hockey operations. So it's bizarre in that sense. But it's going to be an interesting dynamic to me there, because they're two completely different people. Hextall will fill that cupboard. The Penguins have no really good young talent coming, right? That cupboard's bare. So Hextall is a very good drafter, but he's really uber patient when it comes to the NHL roster, whereas Berkey's the complete opposite. Berkey will trade away anything and everything to try and win now. So I think it's going to be an interesting dichotomy between those two. And I think one of two things happens. I don't think there's a middle ground here. I think it's either wildly successful and the Penguins become a really good team again within a couple years, or it burns down like an awful like it goes down like Trump Plaza did in Atlantic City the other day, right? And it just completely is a disaster. So one of those two things will happen. What's that? I'm sorry.
I said hopefully the Flyers paid their bills. I'm not sure that that the Atlantic City incident. Anyway, exactly. Separate issues altogether.
Exactly. But no, seriously. I mean, I think that I think it's an interesting pairing. That could either be really successful or really unsuccessful.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Anthony. And, I wanted to ask you about the goaltending. I know Dave Minuk is probably the biggest Carter Hart fan. He picked him to win the Vezina Trophy this year, and I'm not that far behind. I really like Carter Hart. I mean, he was fantastic for Team Canada at the World Juniors, and, he's been fantastic for the Flyers since he jumped into the NHL. But I wanted to ask you about, what you've seen from Hart early on, how you think his game's grown, but also Brian Elliott, who I think you'd agree has really solidified that backup position.
Yeah, so I'm a big Carter Hart guy too, but I'm also the guy who says you got to be a little bit patient with him. He's still a young kid. He's still finding his way. I think he's going to be an excellent goaltender in the NHL for a long time. But fans in Philadelphia, as nuts as they are, they have him as the savior, and he's going to win them the Stanley Cup this year. And anything short of that, then they're going to give him grief. And it's funny, he got off to a little bit of a slow start this season, and all of a sudden I started to see fans turning on him on social media, and I'm like, whoa. Slow down. Yeah, all right. He didn't have a couple good games, but he's still the goalie, the franchise goalie moving forward. And it's great to have a guy like Brian Elliott behind him, because Elliott is a very good veteran goaltender. He's able to come in once every fifth, sixth game, whatever you need, and play well. He doesn't need a lot of reps. And when Carter had his little mini meltdown in Boston, and they lost the game 6-1. He shattered his stick, goalie stick across the net, and started yelling as he was going off the ice. And everybody was asking about it. And then Vigneault made him sit like 2 games, and Elliott played really well those 2 games. Carter came back, and since he's come back, he's been excellent. He's been really, really, really good. So I think it's kind of that thing where he's got to continue to mature, continue to learn his game and grow his game. And he's that kind of kid who's committed to doing that. On a not just season by season basis, on a day-to-day basis. And I think ultimately he'll be an excellent goalie. But while he's still figuring it out, Brian Elliott's the perfect backup.
Anthony, this year obviously is a year unlike any other. And I don't know about you, but I feel like if it's not happening in the North Division, I have absolutely no idea what's going on. I mean, I actually more localized. Like it's really, if it's not happening with the Jets, I'm hard pressed to find out what's going on. But specifically, what's going on in the North Division, is that kind of the way it is for you within the Flyers division? Is that you guys are really, everybody just seems to be focused on what's happening within division, and the peripheral NHL stuff is kind of getting lost in the shuffle for the focus?
Yeah, I think for the most part it is. I mean, I admit that, on an individual level, like with a lot of the stuff we do at Crossing Broad also ties into gambling. So when we're looking at NHL potential gambling stuff, I have to kind of pay attention to what's going on around the league so I can offer some suggestions in that regard. But outside of that, yes, everything is all about, I mean, there's no doubt we'd look and see what's Boston doing, what's Pittsburgh doing, what's Washington doing. That's all we care about, because you're not going to play a team from the other division until you get to the conference final. Mm-hmm. So if that's even what it's called this year, because there's no real conferences, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's become very parochial, for lack of a better word. Like you only care about 7 other teams at this point, and that's really it. And everything else that's going on is kind of, there's other hockey being played. Like I didn't even realize it's going on. But I think I got to ask you guys, is it great up there in Canada because every team is Canadian at this point? Like, is that a thing that division is like, it's awesome up in Canada right now?
Yeah. I think, I'll jump in, Anthony. Like, I think I speak for everyone when I say that, like, we're following the Canadian division, and probably
you never
not
speak for me, Ezzy.
Okay, yeah.
Rule number 1: you never speak for me.
Okay, Anthony,
pretty sure that's in the Illegal Curve Constitution.
I'll speak for Dave, or maybe just myself, but yeah, I think it's like you said, Anthony. I think we're following the Canadian division, just like Philadelphia Flyers fans or Pittsburgh Penguins fans are following their own division. But I think what has maybe stood out to Canadian team hockey fans the most is just how much drama there's been early on the season, because you have your team playing every second night, sometimes, back-to-back nights, but certainly you've seen a lot of, 3 games in 5 days, or, 4 games in 7 days. And I think, there's so much parity as well in this division, in addition to the other divisions. But, we're based in Winnipeg, so we obviously know what's happening here. But I think, for the most part, Jets fans love this, because, you get to see those, 3 or 4 games in a row against the Flames, or you get to see, a couple of games against the Oilers in a row, a couple of games against the Canucks in a row. So I think there's a lot of fans, here in Canada, but also I imagine in the US that are hoping that, maybe some of the teams that you've seen in this divisional realignment, maybe the NHL decides to keep those teams together.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen at the bare minimum, guys, is I think that the league is going to keep the baseball style scheduling together as much as possible for the future. Now, of course, you're going to have to play teams from the other conference, so you really can't play 2 games in their city and then have them come play 2 in yours. You only can do 1 and 1 in those. But I think that teams that you're going to play for at least 4 times, I think you're going to have a 2-game trip to that city. It saves the teams money. It's more, it's more economical for the league and everything else. And I think that that's going to be a part of the future of the league. And I think it's a cool thing. I mean, I talked to Alain Vigneault about it, and he said, you get to coach a little bit. I talked to Peter Laviolette about it when the Flyers played the Caps last week or 2 weeks ago now. And it's like, it's very reminiscent of playoffs. Like you install something for a team, and then you make small adjustments on the day off in between against that team, as opposed to trying to watch video against a team that you haven't seen in 2-3 months and trying to figure out if your system's going to work against them. So it really I think that part of it is going to be a positive for the league moving forward.
Anthony, I agree. I think it will. And I think it's been enjoyable. The one thing you can notice, the one element that seems to be missing, obviously, is the fans. And we saw it here when the Jets played the Flames. The Jets played the Flames 4 games in a row. And the emotional level really never ratcheted it up. Now, obviously, there's a factor of you have to win games. So you really can't afford to be taking stupid penalties. But I mean, in a playoffs, you see guys, you see scrums, you see that element. And obviously, fans enhance that, right? You have 15,000, 20,000 people screaming bloodlust, it gets going. That's the one element that seems to be really missing. So it'll be interesting next year, hopefully, everything being healthy and able to have fans back in buildings to really, that I think will really ratchet it up, because right now you just don't have that that element of, like, obviously it's important and it's fun, but do you agree? Do you see that lack of fans really missing from adding that emotional element to these games?
Yeah, I do. And because I kind of thought playing the same teams over and over again, that we would see a little bit more animosity, a little bit more rivalry between the two teams. And you see a little bit of it. You see it coming out. You can see these guys are feeling it, but they also, because there's no fans, I think that they can pull it back quicker. I think that they can stop themselves from crossing that line a little bit easier than without the fans egging them on, right? But if you put 20,000 people in the building yelling and screaming when guys start to push and shove, it could get a little bit more, entertaining at that point. So I do think you're right, Dave. I think next season, if they keep that kind of baseball scheduling and you have people in the building, I think we have an opportunity to get a little bit closer to old time hockey. We're not going to go back to the days where there were fights left, right, and center, but at the same time, I do think you're going to see a little bit more physicality, a little bit more of dislike between two franchises, and I think that would be cool.
I don't think anybody would mind seeing the 2012 Penguins Flyers playoff series repeated, at least maybe not with as much blood spilled on the ice, but
right.
Certainly the intensity of that. Anthony, we've been together for over a decade on various platforms, and we've spent a lot of time together. It is so great to see you. So great to see you healthy first and foremost, and God willing, one day we'll be able to do this in person again and tip a few back at one of our favorite watering holes, and all the best to you, old friend, and good to see you.
Thanks, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure. I love coming on your show. I do it anytime you guys ask. So thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Us too. Thanks, Anthony.
There he goes. There goes Anthony Sanfilippo. You can follow Anthony's work at crossingbroad.com. Going to do a quick commercial break here, which involves me reading, so it's not like we go anywhere. And then we're going to talk about the play of Mason Appleton and the impact that has on the Winnipeg Jets expansion plans. We got some Jets talk coming up for you right now. You're listening to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We are live. This segment of the program is brought to you by Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty, official realtors of Illegal Curve Hockey. When 95% of your clients come via referral, it shows your commitment to honesty, integrity, and a total dedication to client satisfaction. If you want to sell your house for more in less time, come shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia online at zappiagroup.com. All righty. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show continues on. We're live here. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search for Illegal Curve Radio or Illegal Curve Hockey on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button. Get notified each and every week when we are live here on YouTube. And of course, anytime we post video from the Winnipeg Jets media availabilities, you can find that on illegalcurve.com and on our YouTube channel. While you're at it, subscribe to the podcast. Get it sent to your device automatically each and every week. Gentlemen, at the beginning of the season, I didn't really think the Jets were going to have very many difficult decisions as it pertains to the upcoming expansion draft. I'll be honest, I didn't see Mason Appleton's ascendancy coming as it has so far this season. He's now tied his career high in goals after last night's empty netter. And sure, you might be saying, yeah, well, he's got a couple empty netters. They don't really count. The counterpoint to that is that means that Paul Maurice has enough trust in Mason Appleton to have him on the ice to maintain and hold on to leads and eventually expand them as it pertains to the empty net goals. Obviously, the Jets are going to go with a 7-3-1 format for the expansion draft. That means they'll protect 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie. The forwards, the no-doubters are Wheeler and Scheifele, Connor and Ehlers, and Dubois. You could probably put Andrew Kopp into that category as well, particularly if the Jets think that they can get him signed to a longer-term contract because he is a RFA at season's end. Adam Lowry, a UFA, so there's maybe not as much pressing issue to protect him in the expansion draft. So from my perspective, it comes down to a decision between Jansen Harkins and Mason Appleton for that sort of final spot for the protection of Jets forwards, one to be protected, one to be exposed. If you had to pick between Appleton and Harkins, who are you protecting and who are you exposing?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, we discussed this. I don't know how long ago it was, Drew. You mentioned this. I mean, the reason why, Adam Lowry might not have to be an issue is because you can have that contract in a drawer and
Yes.
you know that you can, after the expansion draft, you can sign Adam Lowry. So that's first and foremost, just for, those people listening who don't really understand why, Lowry isn't a guy that factors in here. But, I've said this before. I think Jansen Harkins is a guy that I think there's a good chance that the Jets will protect. But, are there two bigger bargains, especially when you're talking about Mason Appleton? Not only is Mason Appleton only making $900,000 AAV, he's under contract for one more season at $900,000 AAV. So you mentioned, Drew, he's got the 10 points. First off, on that empty netter, what a pass by Neal Pionk, to get that pass to Appleton in his own zone. Just a really crafty play. We've talked deservedly a lot about Pionk. He's playing some great hockey for the Jets right now. But I mean, you look at Appleton and you look at Harkins, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think there's some similarities in their games. And I think, we could sit here, Dave, and we could argue who has the higher offensive upside. I would probably argue, that it would be Jansen Harkins, but we're not exactly talking about, guys that are going to be, one day 60 or 70 point players. These are both guys that I think you'd agree are probably more in the, that top out in the kind of 40 to 45 point range. Again, that's just my opinion, but Appleton is such a great story. I mean, Dave should speak to this more than I should, but Appleton's a guy, that has just done it the right way, similar to Jansen Harkins. But this year, clearly Appleton was almost like, why isn't anybody talking about me, right? Because you think about Appleton and he was always just kind of like an afterthought in terms of, maybe Appleton will be on the third line, maybe on the fourth line, but he has played so well, both defensively and offensively. And how many nights off has this guy taken this year? None, in my opinion. He has been so consistent. So I back to your question, I think that, Chevy and the Jets management group are absolutely going to have to, decide whether it's going to be Mason Appleton or Jansen Harkins, assuming that the other forward is Andrew Kopp. And I don't think, Dave, that's going to be an easy decision for Chevy.
No. Excellent job fence sitting and not answering the question there, Mr. Ginsburg.
Well, no,
Dave, are you going to give me an answer? If you had to pick one, between Harkins and Appleton, which one are you protecting and which one are you exposing? Or as a third option, which I probably should have given to Ezzy too, but so be it. Would you try and work a trade similar to what they did with the Vegas expansion draft, where you don't really lose a roster player, you swap a draft pick and have them pick? In the case of Vegas, it was Chris Thorburn.
Well, I mean, yes, obviously, if you're the Winnipeg Jets and you have that third option, then you're going to try and do that. If you, to Ezzy's point, if you can somehow finagle Adam Lowry to wink, wink, nudge, nudge, sign this contract at a later time, add some versatility there. I think that's also a good thing. But you know what? It's a very good question. And you have a guy in Mason Appleton who, Kenny spoke about it when we first started the show and we had him on. He's a guy who left college early. He was going to be the captain at Michigan State. And when he started with the Manitoba Moose, he was on the fourth line. And he worked his way up. And he worked extraordinarily hard. Obviously, AHL Rookie of the Year, 66 points. He was on a very deep Manitoba team. But, I mean, talk about like a diamond in the rough, right? Another late draft pick that the Jets have managed to turn into something. And again, not the Jets. I mean, he himself has done it because he's put in the work. I shouldn't give the Jets credit because the players are the ones who have to do the work and do what they need to do to get that next level to their game. But it's an incredibly hard decision because, Jansen Harkins is center and Paul Maurice has kept him as a center, which generally Paul Maurice hasn't done with players. I mean, Jack Roslovic's a perfect example. Jack Roslovic is a player who with the Manitoba Moose was, I would say, and I can't say it authoritatively because I didn't see all the American Hockey League teams because the Moose didn't play all the teams, especially the ones out east or Eastern United States, I should say. But Jack Roslovic was like the most dominant player in the AHL for the Moose and in the league. And that was at center. And then just before he got called up, the Moose moved him over to the wing. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting because he's been playing center for his entire time here. So clearly, the Jets are thinking about putting him in the wing. And we've seen that traditionally with players, that they generally go to the wing, and Paul Maurice has a more of a veteran presence. Jansen Harkins, though, he's kept at center at times. And so to me, that's an interesting move. But you've also got to factor in, you've got David Gustafsson in the wings. And David Gustafsson to me is a phenomenal young talent. I think he should be with the Moose right now, personally. I don't think he's serving him any good to be with the taxi squad. If you're not playing him, you got to send him down to the Moose. He'll be playing big minutes, and I just think there's just too much value to his development. I'm getting a little off tangent, but I don't really care because I think it's an important thing to say. But you also have to factor that in, right? So again, general managers tend to value centers over wingers, and you have to look at what you have in the kind of development roster. So could you replace Jansen Harkins, who, is going to factor into your maybe third, fourth line center role with a David Gustafsson, if need be, versus a Mason Appleton, who, again, you could, in theory, keep him in that sort of Lowry pairing right now. So it's a very tough one. And again, like I said, I'm not trying to punt on the answer, Drew, but I think
that's why I asked the difficult questions.
No, I know. And I'm just trying to process it out for the listeners to give us their opinion and to have a conversation with you two. But I think there's good reasons for why you'd want to keep both players. I mean, personally, I think what you're seeing from Mason Appleton right now, and again, it's always about recency bias. Right now, we're looking at what Mason Appleton's doing, the 10 points to Jansen Harkins 0. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, are you keeping the guy with 10 or are you keeping the guy with 0? But it's also opportunity, right? Like Jansen Harkins hasn't had the minutes that Mason Appleton has had.
And I was going to jump in here, Dave, and just say that, you mentioned David Gustafsson, who obviously the Jets have high hopes for. But the point is, guys, a couple of months ago, we weren't even talking about Mason Appleton in the context of the expansion draft. That's the point. He's always been a good player. I think we all agree that last year, he was a good player. Didn't necessarily have the points, right? But this year we're seeing that his offensive game has taken that next step. So that's the point for me, is that the fact that he's just in the conversation, he has forced himself there, right? Like you said, he has played so well, that he's there. Another few things to factor in: Paul Stastny's future is uncertain. I mean, this might be, his last year with the Jets. We don't know that. And also, Cole Perfetti, we expect to play some games for the Jets next year, but he's going to play even more games in the 21-22 season. And the reason that's relevant is because, as Dave mentioned, Harkins is a natural center. So if the Jets envision him as possibly playing some minutes as a center, then you're going to have a bit of a logjam there, right? With Perfetti and with you're going to have David Gustafsson in the picture. So I'm not sure at the end of the day, but that's why this is so fascinating, because it seemed like maybe 3 or 4 months ago that, the expansion draft wasn't going to be that intriguing for the Jets, because we basically know who they're going to protect at forward, who they're going to protect on defense. And obviously Hellebuck is the goalie that's going to be protected. But I think with Appleton and Harkins, if one of those guys is exposed, guys, especially because of their contract, and there isn't a deal worked out, absolutely the Seattle Kraken are going to take one of those guys. You don't think they'd love to have one of those guys on their second or third line, making $700,000 or $900,000 a year?
Let me throw this name out here. So we're talking about the forwards, and obviously there's a divide here, and not a difference of opinion, but it's a difficult question. And I'm looking at the YouTube chat, and there's a lot of opinions for Harkins, and there's a lot for Appleton, and same on our Twitter feed, undoubtedly. But let me ask you guys this question. I mean, at the beginning of the year, again, it seemed pretty clear on the back end. You're going to protect 3 defensemen, and you thought that the 3 defensemen were going to be, of course, Morrissey, Pionk, and DeMello. Could you make an argument? Could you foresee a scenario where it's not DeMello being protected by the Jets, but rather it's Logan Stanley, given that he has come into the lineup and performed, I'm going to say, admirably, especially for a guy who really didn't have a lot of expectations on him. DeMello is playing better. He has struggled, but could you foresee a situation where Stanley gets protected ahead of DeMello?
It's possible, right? And none of us expected Stanley to play this many games so early on. We expected him to maybe come in and play some games due to injury, but we certainly didn't expect it to be this many games and so early. So absolutely, I think there's no doubt that Morrissey and Pionk are going to be 1-2. And yeah, sure, DeMello, his game maybe hasn't been where it was last year when he first came over from Ottawa. But yes, Drew, I already answered it, but there is absolutely a chance that Stanley could be protected. I don't think you want to lose him for nothing. But again, it goes back to, our deal is going to be worked out so that the Seattle Kraken don't take Logan Stanley, or they don't take Jansen Harkins or Mason Appleton. We don't know that right now. But it's a good question that you raise, because if Stanley, I believe, didn't have those games played for the Jets this year, I don't think the Jets would have had to expose him. I might be wrong about that.
Well, no, it had nothing to do with the games that he was the games that he played. It's just a matter of where he was in his contract year and the contract status. Dave, I mean, you've seen Stanley probably more than anybody in Winnipeg, given how much time you spend covering the Moose, and that's of course where he played. For the bulk of the last couple of seasons. Could you given what you've seen of him historically, given what you've seen of him this year, albeit in sheltered minutes, but it does seem that Logan Stanley has a viable NHL future, and given his size, would certainly be an attractive asset for a team to get for basically nothing. So how would you sort of balance the Stanley versus DeMello argument as we sit here on the 20th of February?
I think it's an excellent question, Drew. And I think, when Dylan DeMello signed that deal, everybody in Winnipeg was quite happy, because here's a player who they acquired through trade. He looked, very good in that settling down that defensive core, helping to settle down that defensive core last season. And again, we've talked about it, I don't know how many times, where people have said, is Logan Stanley a bust? Is Logan Stanley a bust? And I said, guys, just because a player plays in the AHL doesn't make him a bust. And we had, we don't do call-in shows, or we didn't traditionally do call-in shows very much, but remember, people asked in our last one saying, is he a bust? And I said, well, if he, a guy who could play second pairing, third pairing consistently for you for the next 10 years is considered a bust, then yeah, I guess if he's not a first pairing guy, he could be. But again, he's a guy who, and that's the one thing we live in, you quoted me earlier, we live in such an instant gratification society that if a guy isn't doing X by Y, then somehow he's not doing what he needs to be doing. And look, Jansen Harkins would have been written off, and nobody would even be talking about Jansen Harkins, because when he went to the ECHL, nobody was talking about him. Nobody was talking about Jansen Harkins before, when he wasn't really doing much and he was in and out of the Moose lineup. Then Jansen Harkins reels off 31 points in 31 games for the Manitoba Moose. Just looks like a completely different player. Although interestingly, when I talked to him about it, he really didn't change things up. But he's just a hard worker, and he just works his tail off, and he's focused. Logan Stanley is a guy who dedicated himself, and we talked about it. We've already talked about it on the program. He's a guy who worked his butt off to really take what they were telling him and take it to heart and do what he needed to do to get to that next level. So to me, I think that Stanley is definitely a player that you're going to want to focus on. Again, to Ezzy's point, I didn't anticipate that he would come in and play as many games as he has. I thought, okay, you're going to see a guy who's going to get, a handful of games throughout the course of the year. I anticipated Ville Heinola really getting those minutes, not Logan Stanley. I was wrong. But yeah, I think he's definitely a player that you're looking at. So, long answer, Drew. I think the Jets have, and I think Ezzy said it, and I think he's right. I think the Jets have given these players have given the Jets some tough decisions to make. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it forces the organization to take a look at it and say, okay, we've got players who can, again, because you can't look at it from what are they doing for us. Mason Appleton, has 10 points, Jansen Harkins has 0. You can't just look at what's happening right now. You have to look at what your organization is going to look like 2, 3, 4 years down the road, because that's where you're looking at the impact of these guys.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's going to be so interesting to see, what happens with the defense, because I think, looking at the next couple of years, what's working against Logan Stanley is, you just mentioned, Ville Heinola and Dylan Sandberg are both left shot defensemen. Now, yes, all three of these guys could play their offside. That's not what it's about. But the point is, Josh Morrissey, Neal Pionk, and Dylan DeMello are all going to be or are already signed long-term, right? Pionk is the only guy that isn't signed long-term, but we expect him to be signed to, let's say 5 years, 4 years, right? Could be longer.
For the record, I'm sorry, Ezzy, I want to interrupt you for a second. I believe that, with Pionk coming up at RFA status, I think he's going to get 7 or 8 years from the Jets. If he keeps performing at this level this season, I'm not sure why it's not a Morrissey-esque, 7-8 year deal, given everything that we've seen from him for the past 2 seasons, I think the body of work is there enough to sign him to longer than 3 or 4 years. And I think it's going to be closer to 6, 7, it could be 8 even, but that's just me. I just wanted to put that on the record, put it on the board, so you can go back and say, you heard it here first on February 20th on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Yeah, it's possible he gets something more long-term, like 6 or 7 years, but I think you have to look at where is the room going to be for all these defensemen, right? Because Nathan Beaulieu is a guy doesn't factor in, long-term for the Jets, but Logan Stanley, Ville Heinola, Dylan Samberg do. So, again, these are all good problems to have for Jets management and the Jets coaching staff. But when you're making decisions for the expansion draft, I mean, obviously Ville Heinola and Dylan Samberg don't have to be protected for the expansion draft, but these are guys that they hope are going to be top 4 defensemen, or at the very least are going to be top 6 defensemen, right? So when you add it all up, right, with Josh Morrissey, Neal Pionk, Ville Heinola, Dylan Samberg, Dylan DeMello, Logan I mean, there's only 6 spots in your regular rotation for defensemen, right? So that's what I do think is working a little bit against Logan Stanley. Not saying that he doesn't have a future for the Jets, but I don't know if that future is necessarily in a top role. It's probably going to be a third pairing role, especially when you consider that Ville Heinola is a slam dunk to be in your top 4.
Let me ask you guys this question. So when the Golden Knights came into the NHL, the Jets did make that trade in order to have them select Thorburn. And if I recall correctly, the trade was a swap of first round places, meaning the Golden Knights would move up in the first round and the Jets would move back. And I believe the Jets also threw in a 3rd round pick, if I'm not mistaken, in a later year's draft. How much would you give up to the Kraken in order to have them select a player that is, I'm going to say, not one of the guys you're excited to lose? So Dave, why don't you handle that one first? Are you giving up a 2nd round pick? Are you giving up that swap of 1st round picks? What are you doing? How much incentive are you adding to make it be that the Kraken don't take one of your desired players?
Well, I mean, and again, like I said, to me, it's all about what do you have to replace that player. So do you have the pieces? I mean, again, we've seen in the NHL the importance of depth in organizations. Now, I've always been a proponent of not rushing players. So while the Jets do have a lot of good draft prospects in defensive prospects with the Moose, aside from Ville Heinola, I don't know that any of those guys, maybe Johnny Kovacevic, who's a little bit of an older guy, but like those are guys you generally don't want to be rushed into the NHL. So, maybe Dylan Samberg again, who's a guy who needed some time in the AHL, he can get that opportunity. But again, it becomes a function of what do you have in front of those players? You look at your current depth, right? And you're thinking to yourself, okay, can we afford to lose player A or player B? Well, let's say in this instance, Harkins, Appleton, and Stanley. And if we can we replace them? And again, I think to that point, Christian Vesalainen is a good guy who, is really done. He did a lot with Liga. He's a guy who is going to earn himself, I think, a more regular role with the Winnipeg Jets. He has the size. He has the shot. He's putting some things together. So to me, here's a guy who could pop in and play on the wing if you lose Appleton. I'm just spitballing those replacements because that's what you're really trying to factor in. Again, I've already gone over the Harkins one. If you don't have Harkins, David Gustafsson to me. I mean, this is a guy who is built like a man. We always talk about players having to fill into their, body to mature. David Gustafsson is mature. This is a guy who is already, I'm saying that somewhat sarcastically because he'll still get more mature, but the reality is he's already physically ready to handle the grind of the NHL. And Logan Stanley, another guy who we talk about, who has come in this season in phenomenal shape. Obviously, his game is at a next level that he's able to do it. So you've got Logan Stanley. So to your point, Drew, with the 3 defensemen you're thinking about protecting, right? Let's say you go with Pionk, Morrissey, and DeMello. Don't you want, and you've got Heinola, to Eddie's point, you're going to have Heinola there as well. So those are really going to be your 4 guys. Do you see Stanley being in that, and do you want to protect him? And if you don't, who is that replacement, right? Who is that guy from that next level? Are you going to have to rush a guy like a Dylan Samberg, not rush, you know what I mean, but like move him
Yeah.
up perhaps a little bit
Accelerate.
faster. Accelerate it. Are you going to have to do that? So these are all the things that get factored in. So to me, yeah, I mean, if you're going to say, can you get a draft pick to save your franchise, like not save it, but preserve your franchise, you do it, because the truth is, and again, we've talked about this for however long, the Jets have to win now, right? The Jets have to win, not literally this year, but within the next 2-3 years. That's what that forward group is built for. The defensive group, not so much, right? It's kind of like what it was a few years ago where their forwards were young. Now that defensive group is younger, but the truth is you really don't want to give up too much from this roster because you're trying to win right now.
Yeah, getting away from the expansion draft for a second, I think one of the biggest stories for this Jets team early on has been kind of the unexpected rise of players like Mason Appleton and Logan Stanley. At least for me it is, because I think, we knew that, Patrick Laine was going to be a player to watch because of that hanging over the team, that he could always be traded. And we knew that Jansen Harkins was going to be a player, who had a good chance of taking that next step. Andrew Kopdave is another player that we thought, because we knew that he wanted to play second line center, he was going to be a guy, to watch. But Mason Appleton, Logan Stanley, players drafted by the Jets, we didn't necessarily see this coming. At least, I think the three of us didn't see this coming. The Jets, management and the coaching staff, might have seen a little bit more of an offensive uptick for a player like Appleton, and might have thought a little bit maybe more highly of Logan Stanley. Certainly Pascal Vincent thinks very highly of Logan Stanley, but I think that has been a story because, Dubois didn't play for 2 weeks, and he's now missed 4 games in a row. So players like Andrew Kopp, players like Mason Appleton, they have filled that void for some of these players like Laine. And the reason why I'm saying Laine is because he was obviously traded, and that void wasn't filled by Dubois in the lineup. And Logan Stanley, same thing. Tucker Pullman goes on the COVID-19 protocol list. Logan Stanley is the guy, not Ville Heinola or Dylan Sandberg, that fills that void. So I think for me, that has been a big story, that when you look at that depth chart for the Jets, Logan Stanley has to be further up on that depth chart. Like, he's a guy now that if one of your top 6 defensemen is injured, now you expect Logan Stanley, not Sami Niku, to be the next guy that steps in.
Well, let me stop you right there. And you talk about Stanley, and you talk about his performance. And, this segment of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show is brought to you by Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, officially declared the funniest place in Winnipeg by Illegal Curve Hockey. For over 30 years, Rumors has been bringing Winnipeg the best in stand-up comedy. To purchase tickets or for a list of performers and showtimes, visit rumorscomedyclub.com. Rumors is champing at the bit to reopen. I can't stress that enough. They're not able to do so just yet. They got to wait till they get to about, I think, 50% capacity is the benchmark they need to get to before they're going to be able to open the doors on a regular basis. But you can still support Rumors. Maybe you have a gift coming up, a gift buying opportunity. Buy a gift card for your friends so they can redeem it at Rumors when they get the opportunity. There's probably going to be some more news coming about Rumors Zoom comedy nights. Whatever you need, whenever you need to laugh, be sure to check out rumorscomedyclub.com. So sorry, Ezzy, I interrupted you there for a second there, but you talk about Logan Stanley, and from my perspective, I don't know why Nathan Beaulieu is playing above Logan Stanley in the Jets lineup at this point in time. Forget about Heinola and Sandberg, who are playing the big minutes with the Moose right now. And Dave, you'll talk about the Moose coming up here in a little bit, and their 4-game set against the Marlies this week. But to me, Logan Stanley should be playing above Nate Beaulieu, and I understood why you were playing Beaulieu for a while there. It was to get him enough games so that he met the criteria to be exposed in the expansion draft, but that has happened now. That's happened, I think, 4 or 5 games ago, so I'm not sure why it's Beaulieu over Stanley right now in the Winnipeg Jets lineup. And I got to be honest, if you had told me 3 months ago that this would be the argument I'd be making, I'd be very surprised about that. But that's, Logan Stanley was solid for the Jets on the back end. And I think certainly as solid, if not better, than Nathan Beaulieu.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can make that argument, and I would probably put Stanley in over Beaulieu. I don't know in the grand scheme of things if that's something I'm thinking about. It's not definitely keeping me up at night. But yeah, Logan Stanley.
Your kids are doing that for you.
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, look I think, Dave can speak to the way Ville Heinola has played in those 4 games for the Moose, but I think Heinola is a guy that the Jets coaching staff would probably like to see, in the lineup sooner rather than later. So that's something to factor in. But yeah, I think Nathan Beaulieu has definitely struggled at times. And I realize that, he's playing with a different D partner in Dylan DeMello as opposed to, Tucker Poolman right now. But I think you can make a strong argument that, with Stanley healthy, with Beaulieu healthy, he could be in there. And it's possible we see that tomorrow night in Vancouver, guys. And yes, it's something that we definitely didn't think we would be saying, as recently as, 6 weeks ago. But Stanley has forced himself into that conversation. He's bided his time. He's come up through the Manitoba Moose system. But I think, Dave, we should be, looking more at Ville Heinola and, when we're going to see him in the Jets lineup, because I think you would agree that, he's not going to spend the whole season with the Moose.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Dave, that leads us into, I guess, our Moose conversation for this week. The Moose obviously played the 4 games against the Toronto Marlies. They dropped the first 2, but then they came back with 2 victories Thursday and then late yesterday afternoon to split the 4-game series for the Moose. And obviously, I mean, there's almost nobody in Winnipeg who covers the Moose as prominently and as fulsomely as you do. So what were your thoughts on the Moose in these 4 games, and your thoughts particularly on Ville Heinola, Cole Perfetti, and Dylan Samberg? And of course, keep in mind, and maybe we should just clarify for the audience, of course, Samberg playing on his off wing, playing on the right side, which is, I think, all the more impressive, given his performance this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was interesting because he asked to play on the right side. He told the coaching staff he would be willing to be the guy because he and Ville Heinola both were left side guys, but he offered to switch over to that right side. And, Ken made the point, and it's one I made earlier in the week. I mean, it's a pretty impressive thing for a guy who hasn't played a hockey game since March of last year to come into a pro game. And don't get me wrong, a lot of guys have been in the same boat. A lot of guys haven't played hockey since last March. So it's not as if Dylan Samberg is alone on an island in that regard. But he's switching from college hockey to pro, and he really didn't look like he had missed a beat. Again, there's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some things he has to learn. But I thought it was extraordinarily impressive for him to be able to make that transition to the right side, to look really good doing it. And again, to play that kind of quiet game, because Ken's right. Like, Ville Heinola is a guy, and, we often talk about it at the AHL because it's a lot less crispy than what you expect in the NHL. The passing isn't the same. It's just guys aren't necessarily positioned where they should be. In the NHL, you can generally default to say, okay, there's an expectation. If I go this way, that guy's going to be there. In the AHL, that's not always the case. And that's not to say that these guys are bad. It's just not the NHL. And so that's just the reality of that game. And I think Heinola has looked like a guy who just has an unbelievable amount of talent. But the truth is, he wasn't getting used. So to me, the better value for Ville Heinola was to be at least playing games with the Moose. The Moose have played 4 games this week. That's a lot of hockey, right? So he played 4 games in 5 nights. Not something we regularly see. Mikkel Burden actually played all 4 games. He was pretty good in the last 2. I think he made something like 80 something stops in the last 2 games. He was excellent, and he made it the save of the year candidate in my mind in game 1.
Yeah, sticking the paddle out.
Yeah, I mean, that was phenomenal. But getting back to the defenseman and what the Moose were able to do. I mean, look, the reality is wins and losses aren't going to be significant this season. That's not a big factor right now. The important part is the development. Now, everybody wants to win at the end of the day. When the final buzzer goes, you want to have won that game. But really, it's, are you getting your prospects that opportunity? And look, I mean, the fact is, and I mentioned it earlier, you have 5 defensive prospects in either their rookie or second year who are playing for the Manitoba Moose. And it would be 6 if Luke Green was healthy, but he's out right now with an injury. So you've got these young guys, Ville Heinola, Dylan Samberg, Declan Chisholm in his rookie season, Leon Gavanke, and Johnny Kovacevic. So you have 5 defensive prospects who are regularly playing. Again, Kovacevic got a suspension for a cross-checking that he committed on Tuesday. So he didn't play the games on Thursday and Friday. But you have 5 defensemen who are playing pretty big minutes and pretty big opportunities for the Manitoba Moose. And that to me is ideal because clearly they weren't seeing that with the Winnipeg Jets. They weren't going to get that opportunity. So I just think that there is such a big value for these young guys to be playing in all of these minutes. And, you talk to Pascal Vincent, and that's what he'll say. He says, what are we here for? We're here for development. We're here for these guys to get to that next level. We're a feeder system for the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Pascal Vincent is a coach who wants to win as much as any coach. Trust me, he's not sitting there going, I'm happy to lose, however many games they're going to play, let's say 25 games this season, 24 games. He doesn't want to lose going 0-24, but know that he's developed players. He's a guy who wants to win every single game, but he also knows what is the modus operandi, what is the mantra of the Manitoba Moose, and that is to develop these young players. So he's put Cole Perfetti into a position of success. He put him, in his first game, he played him as the fourth line center, but they went 11-7 for the first two games. So he's put him in that position, and then he moved him up to a line with Christian Reichel and CJ Cease. And Christian Reichel and CJ Cease, obviously CJ Cease is a draft pick of the Winnipeg Jets. Folks know him here. He's a hardworking guy, 200-foot guy. Christian Reichel is a guy who earned an NHL contract with the Winnipeg Jets this last summer. He is a guy, I said it, he doesn't take a shift off. He's a really hard worker, got rewarded with a goal this week. But they put Perfetti on a line with these two guys. So then you have Perfetti playing center with two competent, responsible wingers. And that only can serve him well. Because to Ezzy's point, or I think Wiebe actually said it, earlier, people wanted Perfetti to be playing in the NHL. Well, he's not ready to play in the NHL, but he is a exceptionally
He's going to be there soon.
He is, and he's an exceptionally smart young man. Like, I watched him in his first pro game, and of course he scores in his first pro game, but I watched him, and so did Declan Chisholm on a real nice shot from the point. And he joked afterwards because it was screened, but essentially he said, they don't ask how it went in, just that it went in. But you watched Cole Perfetti, and an exceptionally smart, high IQ, has great vision, just needs that maturity to play a man's game, because it is a man's game. So that's the element in his game that's lacking. And again, it will get there. And here's another guy who obviously played high level at the World Juniors, but had to do a lot of quarantining. So at least now he's getting that opportunity, right? He wasn't in the Jets training camp, so you could somewhat sense that he wasn't going to get that opportunity with the Jets. He's going to get it with the Moose, and it's important. And so that, to me, is the biggest focus. It's the wins and the losses. Yeah, okay, people will focus on that. But the reality is, what happened with Mikkel Burden this week? What happened with Dylan Sandberg this week? What happened with Declan Chisholm? All of these draft picks got opportunity in this system to play games. And that's why, to me, a guy like David Gustafsson is so critical to be off that taxi squad, because he's not playing games for the Winnipeg Jets right now. Get him off the taxi squad, send him to the Moose. They're going to Laval next week, play 4 games against Laval. We don't know what the Moose schedule is like yet for March, but the fact is, get these guys playing, because, look, you can benefit, and I've talked to Dave Gustafsson about it, talked to Cole Perfetti about it. These guys benefit from learning, playing with pro, learning how to stay, like we talked about it, as he talked about it, staying on the ice after a practice and watching what Adam Lowry does. There's huge value to that. And Cole Perfetti talked about talking to Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, picking their brains. And these guys are learning. But at the end of the day, it's always good to learn in school, but you have to go into the real world and put what you've learned to the test. And that's why playing with 22 minutes with the Moose is going to be so critical for these guys this year.
And while we're talking about the Moose guys, we have to talk about our good friend of the show, Eric Comrie, getting claimed by the organization, because even though you guys know I love my Devils, Comrie he has to be a member of the Jets organization. So we got to give him a shout out. Great to see him
by
back
NHL rule at this point in time.
I think someone
he can leave, but he got to come back. It's like Hotel California. You can leave, but you check out. Never leave.
Someone on our Instagram was saying his nickname should be Boomerang, because he always comes back.
No, I love it. Yeah, I have no problem with that nickname. I like it. And then it just gives the Jets, it makes sense for him to be on the taxi squad. So, it's just overall good news. That was probably some of the best news that I saw this week.
We're gonna begin to wrap it up. I want to talk about Christian Vesalainen before we do that, though. Vesalainen obviously wasn't in the game last night. Nate Thompson got the call instead of Vesalainen. To me,
for his PK minutes, but he didn't pay any PK minutes.
That's right. So the argument was that Paul Maurice wanted put Thompson.
He was
in
good
the
on,
lineup.
but he was good on faceoffs. I think he was 67, 68% or something like that.
Right, and I heard Paul Maurice's argument before the game, and I heard his comments post game, justifying the move. But to me, and I understand that Paul Maurice's job is to win games.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that, and we talked about this with Ken a couple hours ago. To me, Christian Vesalainen needs to be a regular in the Jets lineup most every night, even if it's on that fourth line role, and particularly given how he played the last few games, I thought he was beginning to affirm himself as that regular. Same with Logan Stanley when he got taken out of the lineup, and Beaulieu was left in. I just don't understand the logic at this point where you can't use Vesalainen and you can't use Stanley in sheltered minutes, and instead you're using Thompson and you're using Beaulieu. I just don't know where Vesalainen's ever going to get that development to the next level if he's not in there on a regular basis, so that he knows that he can get some consistency and that he knows he can play the game and he's not always looking over his shoulder. Because if you're Vesalainen and you're thinking, if I make one mistake, I'm going to be out of the lineup, that's a lot of pressure, and that's a real difficult position to play yourself in. And I note that Jansen Harkins, remember, last year, he had that mistake late in the game against the Oilers in Edmonton. It was a Saturday night game. The Jets ended up losing. It was a function of, Draisaitl, I think, took advantage of a younger player in Harkins, and Maurice kept Harkins in the lineup going forward, which I thought was a big vote of confidence. I think it's time that the Jets do the same, particularly with Christian Vesalainen on that fourth line.
Well, look at the game tomorrow night. It's going to be very telling. You have Pierre-Luc Dubois, who could possibly, obviously what happens at practice later this afternoon is going to determine whether he plays tomorrow. But you're going to have two players now that you want to get into the lineup, Vesalainen and Dubois. So obviously Nate Thompson, just because he was the last player to go back into the lineup, would be the obvious one there if Pierre-Luc Dubois comes out. But you wonder, if Dubois comes back, is there a chance that Vesalainen comes in and who that player is going to be? Wiebe mentioned this, and I agree with him 100%. Like Vesalainen, Jansen Harkins, Trevor Lewis, I have time for that line. I think they didn't get a lot of ice time. I think they were each around 8 to 10 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, in that game against the Oilers. But I can see that line having some offensive upside, but also you have Vesalainen on a line maybe with Mason Appleton and Adam Lowry. Look, Drew, there's no doubt that Vesalainen at 21 years old has got to play games. He has to play games. He can't, be sitting out for extended periods of time, whether that's, 4 days, 5 days, or 2 weeks. So yeah, I would have Vesalainen in the lineup if I can. There's a logjam right now. We mentioned that on defense. There's a logjam at forward, right? You got to have Jansen Harkins in the lineup. You obviously have to have Mason Appleton in the lineup. So, when you take out a guy like Trevor Lewis to get Vesalainen into the lineup, I don't know, because Lewis has been very effective in a penalty killing role, right? So, yeah. I'll say this much. I'll leave it and give Dave the last word here. I think you do have to find a way to get Vesalainen in there.
Yeah, and I think to answer if you ask Paul Maurice, essentially what he said was that you need a player who does two things, right? And he's essentially saying that Vesalainen isn't a guy he can throw on the PK at this point or the PP, and as a result, he's not going to be that guy who's going to stay in the lineup as a result of that. So that's what Paul Maurice's justification was. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it is obviously everybody else's prerogative. But that's just what, if people are going to say, what is the reason why you have Nate Thompson in? And again, we know how the Jets coach tends to default to veterans versus younger players. So, there's that. But Drew, I think you make a valid point. Again, so send Vesalainen to the Moose. He doesn't have to pass through waivers. Let him play minutes, because again, he's not going to get any better. One of the best lines last year for the Manitoba Moose to end the season for the last 10 games, obviously before the pause, was Christian Vesalainen, David Gustafsson, and Christian Reichel. They were really good together. They played 10 games together. And again, having that ability to allow even Cole Perfetti to move down and not have any sort of pressure, face the other team's top players, that could be a benefit to him. But again, if you're not playing these guys, don't waste them on the tax squad. Paul Maurice talked about that in training camp. Said, I don't have an intention of keeping young players on the taxi squad. Well, he's at a point close, at least in my mind, with David Gustafsson, that you're wasting time with him because, again, I get that there's a value to training with these players, but they have to, again, like I use that analogy of school. You've taught them in school. Let them go into the real world and show that they can do it. And David Gustafsson is a guy who I think absolutely needs to play minutes. And Christopher Vesalainen is the same thing. If you're not going to play him in the NHL, if you think that he still has elements of his game, like Paul Maurice's been highly complimentary of Christian Vesalainen. He's talked very positively about him. But if you don't have the confidence to put him in your lineup, then send him to the Manitoba Moose, let him play with the Manitoba Moose. And when you have a spot for him, bring him up and play him. Because the yo-yoing is just, I don't think, look, Ken was right in one element. You have to earn your spot. But again, it's difficult to your point, A, with the limited number of minutes that they were playing, and B, that idea of like, okay, well, am I going to just lose my job because a veteran's available who can do more than what I'm able to do? Well, okay, well then send him to the Moose. And guess what? Pascal Vincent played Christopher Vesalainen on the penalty kill last year. I want to say, I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but I'm fairly certain he played on the penalty kill last year for the Manitoba Moose. David Gustafsson for sure did. I think Christopher Vesalainen did as well. So let him go and learn that element. Let him go and develop that with the Manitoba Moose. If that's your position, and you're the head coach, you're the one who has to make decisions, because at the end of the day, it's your head on the line if you're going to keep your job or lose your job. So you have to make a decision that you're confident in. But if you're going to make that decision, if I'm the general manager, I'm saying that's fine. But we've got other guys who can sit on the taxi squad who don't need to spend time developing. Christopher Vesalainen isn't one of them. So again, I've been as vocal as anybody who would say you don't waste development years not playing games. And before the Moose were back, I understood it. That's why when people would come at me with, well, Paul Maurice said this, I said, look, the Moose aren't playing. So if he can practice with the Jets or practice with the Moose, practice him with the Jets. It's better for his development. But the Moose are back. They're playing games. They played 4 this week. That's a lot better than sitting in the press box, although they don't sit in the press box anymore.
And with that soliloquy, I can't end the show any better than that. Dave Minuk laying down the law to wrap up this Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We want to thank everybody who tuned in on YouTube. And remember, each and every Saturday, we're going to be live on our YouTube channel, Illegal Curve Radio. You can search for that. Search for Illegal Curve Hockey as well. Remember to smash that subscribe button. You'll be notified each and every time we go live. And of course, our YouTube channel has all of the latest Winnipeg Jets video that we post, particularly the pre and post game Zoom calls. You can find it all on our YouTube channel as well as illegalcurve.com. We want to say thank you to the guests who joined us on today's show, Ken Wiebe of Sportsnet, our good buddy Gary Lawless, and Anthony Sanfilippo. In case you missed any of the show, just hit the subscribe button and get the podcast sent to you automatically each and every Saturday. Big thank you to our sponsors, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Bernstein's Deli, Linden Market Dental Center, and Zappia Group Realty. Support these fine local businesses because they support Illegal Curve Hockey. Big thanks to Ezra Ginsburg. He's coming towards the light based on the sun that's shining in there. To Dave Minuk, I am your host, Drew Mindell. Thanks so much for joining us. This has been the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.